Chapter 46-68. Anyone could see the greed in his eyes. From the moment he saw Lin Yi talking to Huiyudi, he already disliked Lin Yi. This was the perfect opportunity to make things difficult for him. Lin Yi frowned slightly when he heard this. Other than Huiyudi, these people were insignificant in his eyes. He was too lazy to pay attention to them. He didn't even bother to look at them. However, if they didn't have eyes and provoked him, then there was nothing much to say. "Alright, native teammate, there's nothing for you to do here. You can leave." The tall man directly waved his hand to signal the guest to leave. Other than him, no other man should even think about getting close to Huiyudi. Lin Yi turned his head to look at Huiyudi. He wouldn't get angry because of a few words from this kind of jumping clown. He would either directly ignore it or directly crush it to death. The key was to see what this little girl was going to choose. Huiyudi frowned. Finally, she gritted her teeth and said to Lin Yi, "Let's go." "Oh." Lin Yi nodded indifferently. These people didn't enter his eyes. Moreover, this was their internal dispute. Lin Yi had no interest in getting involved at all. TSK, senior sister Hua, what do you want me to say? You actually didn't hesitate to fall out with us for a wild man. People said that you're as pure as ice and as clean as jade. Bah, it turns out that you're just a bastard. You really don't even want your face. Carrie immediately mocked and ridiculed mercilessly. "What did you say?" Huiyudi suddenly turned around and glared at her. Even Lin Yi couldn't bear to listen to this kind of filthy words, let alone a girl like her who valued her reputation and integrity. "You know what I'm saying. Since you can do this kind of stupid thing, why can't I say it?" "Humph, I say, do you want to keep it for yourself? You can't be naive enough to think that you can get what we're looking for by pulling in such a wild man, right? You're simply daydreaming." Carrie continued to taunt and ridicule. When Lin Yi heard this, his heart moved slightly. Listening to these words, could it be that these people also came for the Thunder Xian Vine? Originally, if it was someone unrelated to him, then he really couldn't be bothered to deal with it. But if it was a competitor. Furthermore, he was so arrogant that it would be inexcusable if he didn't do something about it. Huiyudi was about to retort, but Carrie didn't give her a chance. She turned to look at Lin Yi and sneered, "Country bumpkin. I'll give you a piece of advice out of goodwill. This senior martial brother Renjong Yuan is senior martial sister Hua's suitor. Not only is he very strong, but he also has a bad temper. You should be careful. Don't die." As Carrie spoke, the tall man called Renjong Yuan cooperated with her and sneered coldly. The gaze he looked at Lin Yi shockingly carried a bit of killing intent. It seemed that if he didn't cooperate, this guy really intended to do something. Unfortunately, this person had obviously found the wrong target. Lin Yi's gaze was much colder and sharper than his. When their gazes met, it was Renjong Yuan who subconsciously took a step back. This scene really shocked the others. Renjong Yuan was a genius disciple of the East Continent Institute. And in everyone's eyes, Lin Yi was nothing more than a country bumpkin. There was absolutely no comparison between them. Who would have thought that Renjong Yuan, the genius of the East Continent, would be scared off by a country bumpkin? Having accidentally made a fool of himself, Renjong Yuan immediately flew into a rage out of humiliation. At this moment, Lin Yi's cold gaze still fell on his face. He indifferently spat out a sentence, "Trash, you better not waste my time. Otherwise, I'll kill you." "What? You actually dare to call me trash? You even said you want to kill me? You're just a country bumpkin, how dare you?" Renjong Yuan immediately erupted. The powerful aura of a nascent soul-perfected stage expert instantly poured out without reservation. He was originally an extremely arrogant person. Moreover, right now in front of his sweetheart, Huiyudi, how could he possibly admit defeat? The powerful aura caused the surrounding sand and stones to fly, and the wind to howl. It was a terrifying scene filled with murderous intent. However, Lin Yi stood still in the middle of it. He didn't seem to emit any powerful aura, but the surrounding did not affect him at all. He didn't even blink. Huiyudi was shocked. She didn't know that Lin Yi had the powerful strength to fight against enemies of a higher level. Killing a profound ascending stage expert was like playing a game. She only knew that Lin Yi's current strength was at the peak of the early nascent soul stage. In front of a person like Renjong Yuan, it could be said that he was too weak to withstand a single blow. "Senior brother Ren, stop. If that's the case, let's go together. This senior brother Lin's identity is not trivial. You can't be rude to him." Huiyudi hurriedly stood in front of Lin Yi. Once the two sides clashed, in her opinion, Lin Yi would definitely die. In that case, the previous agreement would be in vain. "What? You said that this country bumpkin's background is not small? He's just a country bumpkin, what background can he have?" Jelly curled her lips disapprovingly. "His name is Lin Yi. He's a teammate arranged by my master. His master is an old friend of my master in the North Island, Shanghai Tianhua. Huiyuti clenched her teeth and said. Linny glanced at Huiyuti in surprise. He estimated that she just thought of a lie in a moment of inspiration. However, in Linny's opinion, it was half true and half false. Her brain turned quite fast. What? Shanghai Tianhua. Whether it was Jelly, Renzhong Yuan, or the other man, they couldn't help but change their expressions when they heard Huiyuti's words. Obviously, they had all heard of this top boss of the North Island. However, after Jelly recovered from her shock, she obviously still didn't quite believe it. Him? He's a disciple of Shanghai Tianhua? Why haven't I heard of him? Didn't you see that he sat with Shangguan Laner at the birthday banquet before? Before entering the teleportation portal just now, Shangguan Laner was still following him. Think about it yourself. If he wasn't the personal disciple of Shanghai Tianhua, would the little princess of the North Island have such a close relationship with him? Huiyuti said seriously. Linny couldn't help but laugh inwardly when he heard that. Although it was a cover, it was 90% true. At least it was true that he had been with Shangguan Lan all this time. He didn't expect this girl to be such a master of lying. She was so good at it, and no one could see through her lies at all. Sure enough, after hearing Huiyuti's words, Renzhong Yuan and the others had already remembered the scene that they had accidentally glimpsed before. It seemed that Shangguan Laner was beside the person in front of them. In that case, this guy was really a disciple of Shanghai Tianhua. They were the genius disciples of East State College. It was understandable for them to put on a high and mighty attitude when they came out to West Island. After all, the standard of East State was much higher than that of other Heaven Stage islands. However, if the other party was the personal disciple of Shanghai Tianhua, then they were in the wrong place. Chapter 4669. That was because Shangguan Tianhua was one of the top powerhouses of the 5 heaven-ranked islands. Even their backers would have to clasp their hands in greeting when they saw him, to say nothing of juniors like them. All right, for the sake of Deputy Island Master Shangguan, I'll bring you along to reap some benefits. Renzhong Yuan snorted coldly and had to stop bitterly. Deputy Island Master Shangguan? This time, it was Linny who was a little stunned. He had been on Heaven Stage Island for so long and had some interactions with Shanghai Tianhua, but he had never heard that this person was actually the Deputy Island Master of the North Island. All along, the North Island had always emphasized the 3 pavilions. From top to bottom, everyone would say that it was the 3 pavilions of the North Island. Under this background, even the Island Master was extremely mysterious, let alone the Deputy Island Master. Everyone knew that Shanghai Tianhua was the Pavilion Master of Soaring Pavilion, but not many people knew about his identity as the Deputy Island Master of the North Island. At least, newcomers like Linny who were inexperienced had never heard of it. Seeing how Renzhong Yuan and the others looked at him as if they were giving him charity, Linny didn't have the hostility he had before. Seeing that everyone was looking at him, especially Huiyuti's pleading eyes, Lin Yi's lips curled up slightly, and he nodded noncommittally. All right, thanks for the trouble. Although these people were not worth mentioning, if it was not necessary, Linny did not want to have a conflict with the people of the East Continent for the time being. After all, these people had deep backgrounds in various academies. Unless it was absolutely necessary, Linny did not want to make enemies with them. Seeing that Linny was so cooperative, Huiyuti finally breathed a sigh of relief. From their previous contact, she had already seen that Linny had an indescribable arrogance. Although it was not obvious on the surface, in fact, it was everywhere. She was really afraid that if Linny had a conflict with these people, it would really be out of control. Fortunately, Linny might be arrogant, but he wasn't completely clueless. At least he knew when to yield and when to stand tall. He was not a brainless person. Junior apprentice sister Yu Dai, let's go. Renzhong Yuan immediately led the way forward. At the same time, he didn't forget to glance back at Linny. I hope you won't be a burden to us. Otherwise, even if you're Vice Island Master Shangguan's personal disciple, it'll be useless. If you die in the trial due to your lack of strength, no one will be able to say anything. Carrie and the other man followed behind her. She also sized up Linny with a profound gaze. With a mocking expression, she said, "Hee hee, no wonder senior sister Hua took a fancy to you. So you have such a powerful backer. But still, be careful, don't die." Linny shrugged his shoulders indifferently. It seemed that these guys really treated him as a punching bag. Did they really think that he was a pushover? It was fine if nothing happened along the way. Otherwise, he might end up kicking an iron plate. Don't take it to heart. They took their anger out on you because of me. I'm sorry. Huiyuti deliberately walked at the back with Linny and apologized in a low voice. Oh, it doesn't matter to me. Linny replied with a faint smile. And, that's good. Seeing that Lin Yi's calm appearance didn't seem to be fake, Hui Yudi's eyes couldn't help but show some appreciation. A look of admiration appeared in Hui Yudi's eyes. Although her strength was far from Ren Zhongyuan's and the others, it was rare to see such an indifferent attitude. Compared to those people, it was obvious who was superior. Forgive me for asking, but are you sure there's no problem with moving with the three of them? Lin Yi suddenly asked. His goal with Hui Yudi was the Thunder Xian Ratan. Now, it was obvious that he had disrupted Hui Yudi's original plan and rhythm. If he couldn't obtain the Thunder Xian Ratan like this, he didn't want to waste time with these people. Hui Yudi was also a little hesitant. She said with some hesitation, one more person means one more strength. Moving with them can be said to have advantages and disadvantages. Let's take it one step at a time. If it doesn't work, we'll think of another way. Okay. If that's what you're saying, then I have no objections. Lin Yi nodded. It was obvious that Hui Yudi didn't want to say too much. Her words were ambiguous, and he didn't know what she meant. He then asked, "Oh, by the way, who are they specifically?" Although he could infer some identity information from just a few words, it was, after all, not complete. Lin Yi felt that it was necessary to first find out the other party's background. When there was a conflict, it would be convenient for him to weigh the pros and cons and not have too many misgivings. The man in the front is called Ren Zhongyuan. You also heard this. He is a disciple of East Continent's Soaring Cloud Academy. He doesn't have any background in Soaring Cloud Academy, but he is the son of our academy's Grand Chancellor. Speaking of this person, Hui Yudi's eyes clearly showed a bit of disgust. It could be seen that this suitor was really not in her favor. Grand Chancellor? Lin Yi was stunned. He had heard of positions like Grand Chancellor. For example, his old rival Nantian Aurora was the Grand Chancellor of Middle Island's Cultivator Academy. However, this was the first time he had heard of Grand Chancellor. Yes, this is a special position of East Continent's Academy. In terms of authority, it is basically equal to that of the Vice Dean. The two positions both overlap and oppose each other. To a certain extent, the control of the Academy is even stronger than that of the Vice Dean, because all the Grand Chancellors and students are under the jurisdiction of the Grand Chancellor. Everything is decided by the Grand Chancellor. Hui Yudi explained. I see. Lin Yi roughly understood the meaning of this position. It was mostly because East Continent's Academy was too powerful, so it was specially set up to balance the power of the Academy, so that the Vice Dean could not cover the sky with one hand. After all, the Dean of each Academy would not have the mood to personally manage the internal affairs of the Academy. The other man is called Yi Xiaotian. He is also a disciple of Soaring Cloud Academy. His uncle is a Vice Dean of Soaring Cloud Academy. Speaking of this, Hui Yudi suddenly paused. She blushed and said in a mosquito-like voice, he is Jelly's cultivation partner, so he often comes to our academy with Ren Zhongyuan. Cultivation partner? Lin Yi could not help but look at the two of them strangely. Sure enough, Yi Xiaotian's hand was restlessly groping Jelly's body. He dared to do such a thing in front of them, he was really a weirdo. However, this brat might not necessarily be uninterested in Hui Yudi. Although his reaction was not as big as Ren Zhongyuan's, his gaze towards Hui Yudi was clearly filled with lust. Eating from the bowl and looking at the pot, this was a common problem of young masters. As for junior sister Jelly, her full name is Yao Jelly. She is the granddaughter of our Morning Pride Academy's Vice Dean. Hui Yudi suddenly looked at Lin Yi with a deep meaning, then continued to say, the secular world girl that I told you about before, only ended up like this because she offended her. Chapter 4670. No wonder I don't like her. Lin Yi's eyes turned cold. No matter who the secular world girl was, no matter if she was his confidant or not, he had already blacklisted Yao Jelly. Although he didn't plan to deal with her for now, if there was a chance, Lin Yi didn't mind pushing the boat along. Hui Yudi's gaze towards Yao Jelly from behind was not very friendly either. Both of them had the vice headmaster of Morning Pride Academy behind them, and their competitive relationship was fierce, so they had never been on good terms. Especially after the secular world girl incident, the two of them almost fell out, and there were already signs of them breaking up in public. Otherwise, as fellow disciples of Morning Pride Academy, their relationship wouldn't be so bad. Junior sister Yudi, when did you meet him? How come I didn't know? At this time, Ren Zhongyuan, who was walking in front, suddenly took a few steps back and came over. He was obviously jealous of Lin Yi and Hui Yudi's conversation. My master and his master are old friends, is it strange that we know each other? Hui Yudi replied with a cold face. But I've never heard you mention it before, why did you suddenly come out this time? Ren Zhongyuan still didn't give up. Senior brother Ren, there are many things you don't know about me. Huayudi's tone was stiff, and she was clearly a little impatient with this guy, almost falling out with him. Haha, you're right, that's why I want to know more about you, junior sister Yudi. Renjong Yuan, on the other hand, didn't seem to be aware of it at all. He continued to smile as he glanced at Linny discreetly. As long as he didn't let the two of them whisper to each other, he'd have achieved his goal. Huayudi looked at him and didn't reply, but Renjong Yuan wouldn't give up so easily. The other person's attitude was cold, but he still didn't get tired of it. This kind of dogskin plaster was a match for Kong Mingming. As for Linny, ever since Renjong Yuan came over, he simply kept his mouth shut, as if he really had become a follower. In reality, if not for the Thunder Xian Vine, he couldn't be bothered to travel with these people. The five of them continued forward. After walking out of the mouth of the canyon, the front suddenly opened up. Linny originally thought that this was at most a small island, but the scene in front of him shocked him. This was actually a desert. It wasn't a pure desert. Patches of vegetation could still be seen here and there, but at least 80% of what they could see was barren land. It wasn't to say that there wasn't an inch of grass, but it gave off a feeling of death. Ever since they arrived at Heaven Stage Island, every time he went on an adventure or a trial, Linny would basically spend his time in a lush, primitive forest. He did not expect that this time would be an exception. What surprised him even more was that this undulating desert was boundless. It didn't feel like an isolated island in Zhonghai at all. Linny was a little surprised, but his companions didn't seem surprised at all, as if they already knew about it. Thinking about it carefully, it wasn't strange. Morning Pride Academy was a purely female academy, and it had a close relationship with West Island. In the past, even if the trial of West Island was not open to the public, it was not necessarily forbidden for them, so it was normal to know about it in advance. After walking out of the mouth of the canyon, they couldn't see the other trial takers around. These people were all here for the treasures of heaven and earth. Acting separately was the minimum principle. Otherwise, if everyone gathered together, they would have to kill each other when they found some treasures of heaven and earth. That situation was obviously not what they wanted to see. It was not only inefficient, but also stupid. Wait, let's determine the route. Renjong Yuan suddenly said. Then he took out a map from his arms. Linny glanced at it from a distance. It should be a map of an island, but this island was obviously much larger than he expected. In terms of area alone, it should be comparable to those big islands in the South Sea. Yi Xiaotian, who was touching Yao Jelly in front, took out a compass from his backpack when he heard this. It looked very exquisite from a distance, and one could faintly feel the fluctuation of a profound formation. This should be a rare high-grade product on the market. No wonder he was the son of East Continent Academy, his equipment was really advanced. The two compared the map with the compass, and soon determined the direction. Renjong Yuan pointed to a higher hillside in front of the left and said, "Go that way." Renjong Yuan took the lead again, and Yi Xiaotian and Yao Jelly followed closely. Huayudi frowned, opened her mouth slightly, but did not speak, and followed the three people. Did they really come for the Thunder Xian Ratan? Linny couldn't help but feel troubled. Looking at how serious they were, it was obvious that they'd prepared for this. If that was the case, would his promise with Huayudi still be valid? Linny frowned thoughtfully. Looking at the attitude of Renjong Yuan and others, he knew that they would definitely not share this rare treasure of heaven and earth with him, and even Huayudi might not get much. After all, it seemed that they were incompatible just now. If it really came to that point, they would inevitably fall out. At that time, should he continue to cooperate with Huayudi, or simply find a chance to directly take it? After all, if they really fought, the previous agreement would have nothing to do with it. No matter what he did, there was nothing wrong with it. Linny followed them while calculating in his heart. Renjong Yuan and others were unaware of this. A mere burden of the early nascent soul stage was nothing in their eyes. These masters of the great perfection of the nascent soul stage did not even put him in their eyes. They did not know that they had become the prey of others. At this moment, they were still immersed in their arrogance and could not extricate themselves. Renjong Yuan led the way in front. The five people trekked in the desert for half an hour. Not to mention any crisis along the way, they did not even see a living creature. The scene in front of them was the same. Except for the desert, there was more desert. The only slight change was the terrain. Following the route pointed by the map, everyone found that the terrain under their feet was getting higher and higher. It was originally just a slowly undulating hillside, but now it had become a towering mountain range. The road ahead gradually became narrow, and on both sides were bottomless canyons. However, a desert was a desert after all. Even if the terrain was strange, the scene was really not good to look at. This kind of dull feeling was completely different from the expected crisis. Everyone even couldn't help but have the same doubt. How could there be treasures of heaven and earth in this place? However, things had already come to this point. Everyone could only continue to move forward, praying that this time they would not return empty-handed. Otherwise, all the feelings they had been looking forward to for so long would be wasted. Suddenly, there was a trace of inexplicable warning in Lin Yi's heart. The jade pendant sounded at the same time, and his face immediately changed. He quickly stopped and at the same time, pulled Huiyuti, who was not far in front of him. Chapter 4671. Huiyuti subconsciously whispered. She didn't expect that Lin Yi, who had always been well-behaved and could even be said to be impatient with her, would suddenly make a move. However, before she could finish speaking, there was a sudden change in front of them. More than a dozen vines as thick as buckets suddenly soared from the ground. With a terrifying sound of breaking through the air, they swept towards the direction of the crowd at a speed that was difficult to be seen by the naked eye. Because of the previous repetition, everyone was more or less careless at the moment, and the attack of these giant vines was so sudden and so fierce that Renzhong Yuan, Yi Xiaotian, and Yao Jieli, who were walking at the front, had no chance to react at all, and were instantly hit by these vines. Only Lin Yi, who was already vigilant, and Huiyuti, who was pulled by him, barely escaped this disaster. However, Renzhong Yuan and the other two were masters of the Yuanying stage after all. Even if they were caught off guard and could not avoid it, they still made a response in a hurry. At the moment when they were attacked by this giant vine, Renzhong Yuan and Yi Xiaotian were covered with a layer of golden true energy at the same time. The vine seemed to be unable to shake the defense of this layer of golden true energy, giving Lin Yi the feeling that it was like the legendary golden bell cover. As for Yao Jieli, although she was not as rigid as Renzhong Yuan and Yi Xiaotian, her movement technique was extremely flexible. Her whole body twisted quickly like a water snake. At the last moment, she was barely able to avoid her vital parts, but she was inevitably scratched a little, not to mention that she was wearing a cyan soft armor, so this power was still bearable. Seeing this, Lin Yi raised his eyebrows slightly. Although her character was not good, there was no doubt about her strength. She was worthy of being an elite master from the East Continent Academy. If it was replaced by other masters of the Yuanying stage, they may not be able to make such a timely response. However, the three of them were still covered in dirt. They were almost knocked down into the valley by these giant vines just now, and were instantly whipped back. After retreating a distance with great difficulty, they stared at the giant vines in front of them that were baring their fangs and brandishing their claws. What is this thing? While everyone was shocked, Huiyuti couldn't help but look at Lin Yi. If it weren't for Lin Yi pulling her, she would definitely be like Renzhong Yuan and the other two at the moment. She would not be injured, but she would definitely be very embarrassed. Everyone carefully retreated while carefully observing the giant vines that had appeared out of thin air. What was surprising was that such a large number of giant vines actually grew from the same root system. In other words, such an earth-shattering momentum actually came from the same plant. Lin Yi looked at the bottom of this terrible plant. Previously, it was difficult to detect because it was hidden in the sand, but at this moment, it was clearly seen that its huge roots had firmly penetrated into the entire mountain, completely blocked the road. How can there be such a strange plant? Seeing that the giant vines were about to attack again, Yao Jieli couldn't help but exclaim in horror. Everyone also couldn't help but look at each other. Just now, they felt that it was boring, but now it was really fun. From the moment of exchange just now, they could feel that this giant vine monster's strength was at least above the Yuanying stage. Even if they joined forces, they didn't have much chance of winning against this strange existence. Huiyuti retreated to a safe distance and carefully observed for a while. Suddenly, she said, "This is a dummy vine, a vine monster that has become a spirit. I've seen it in an ancient book before." Oh? Upon hearing this, Lin Yi couldn't help but be a little surprised. He had seen all kinds of powerful spirit beasts, but plants were very rare. However, it wasn't that he had never seen them before. At least, there were similar existences in the mountains behind the North Island. During that trip to Half Moon Lake, if it weren't for the ghost that deterred it, Lin Yi would have already become a pile of fertilizer. Although Lin Yi's strength at that time was much lower than now, his intuition told him that although the dummy vine in front of him was strong, it was far from being comparable to the monster in the mountains behind the North Island. After all, the entire Half Moon Lake was the body of that guy. Even the ghost couldn't do anything to it, and the dummy vine in front of him was obviously not at that level. Lin Yi evaluated in his heart. Judging from the fight between Renzhong Yuan and the others and the dummy vine just now, with his strength, he should be able to kill the dummy vine, but with the strength of the others, it was not so easy to say. That's right, I remember. After listening to Huiyuti's words, Yi Xiaotian suddenly shouted, This is the ancient battlefield, and there are remnants of artistic conception and spiritual energy everywhere. After the plants here absorb it, it is very likely that there will be a mutation. That's how the dummy vine came about. I'm afraid that it doesn't just absorb artistic conception and spiritual energy. Maybe even the remnant spirit of the battlefield will be swallowed by it. Otherwise, how can it become such a terrible monster? Renjong Yuan said with a look of fear. It was pure luck that he wasn't injured just now. His protective golden bell was almost smashed by the giant vine. If that really happened, the consequences would be unimaginable. Then what should we do? Yao Jelly became more and more frightened. Among the three of them, she was the most embarrassed. The shock that the dummy vine brought to her was naturally far more profound than the others. She immediately panicked and said, "We want to pick the long roots, so this is the only way, right? You." Renjong Yuan's face suddenly changed, and he glared at Yao Jelly fiercely. It seemed that he was very angry with her for revealing the purpose of their trip. Yao Jelly reacted. There were not only the three of them present. Hui Yudi was fine, but there was also an outsider, Lin Yi, behind them. Forget it, it doesn't matter if that kid knows. Anyway, it has nothing to do with him. Yi Xiaotian mediated for her. In fact, Lin Yi was only at the peak of the early nascent soul stage. They didn't put him in their eyes at all. For the sake of Shanghai Tianhua's reputation, they could just give him some things. If he really dared to ask for rare treasures, then they would teach him how to behave. While the three of them were talking, Lin Yi couldn't help but secretly whisper. What was this long route? But in this way, the purpose of these three people was not the same as that of Hui Yudi. That was to say, they didn't know that Hui Yudi was going to find the Thunder Xian vine? Thinking about it carefully, it was normal. Although they were in the same school, the fierce competition could be said to be incompatible like fire and water. It was impossible to achieve a real sense of mutual exchange, especially when it came to strategic-level treasures like the Thunder Xian vine. Hui Yudi could probably know it from Lu Ziyu, the master who was on good terms with West Island. People like Renjong Yuan might not have this way. R1152. Chapter 4672. Lin Yi turned his head and glanced at Hui Yudi, who happened to be looking at him at the moment. Not only because his previous reaction made her look at him in a new light, but also because she was giving him a look. Don't leak the matter of the Thunder Xian vine, or these people would definitely become big trouble. There were dummies blocking the way in front, and everyone was unwilling to go back like this, so they were suddenly in a dilemma. Lin Yi and Hui Yudi, on the other hand, didn't really care. They weren't here for the immortal route in the first place, and they didn't even want to travel with these people. At this moment, they stood at the back and didn't have any intention of stepping forward to solve the problem. Senior Brother Yi, quickly think of a way. What should we do now? Should we change the route? Yao Jelly asked in a panic. Change the route? How is that possible? Don't you see that there are bottomless canyons on both sides? Even if we can find the second route, how long will it take? Our time is limited. Yi Xiaotian shook his head again and again. The trial time of Yuanying stage peak was at most 1 month. Although it was the longest compared to others, it was still very limited and couldn't afford to waste any time. Yes, even this mountain peak has such a terrible monster, who knows what is in the bottomless canyon? Maybe it is a mass grave left from ancient times, and there are terrible existences in it that we don't even dare to think about. It's hard to say whether we can survive it or not. Renjong Yuan agreed. Doesn't that mean we have no other choice? Yao Jelly's face couldn't help but turn a little blue. Just now, it was only one of the giant vines that attacked her, but in front of them was a dense mass of dummies. These giant vines were simply overwhelming, and there were dozens or even hundreds of them. If they were a little careless, wouldn't they be smashed into pieces? There is no other way, there is only one way, we can't give up halfway. Let's go. Renjong Yuan took a deep breath, and the protective golden bell on his body appeared again. He braced himself and took the lead to kill the dummies in front of him. Even though he knew that there was a tiger in the mountain, he still had to go there. He did not want to appear cowardly in front of Hui Yudi, especially when there was such a loathsome person like Lin Yi. Although the disparity between them meant that they would not be rivals in love or competitors, what if this brat had ulterior motives and took the opportunity to belittle him in front of Hui Yudi? Yi Xiaotian and Yao Jelly looked at each other. They had no choice but to follow her. Before they made their move, Yao Jelly intentionally glanced at Hui Yudi and Lin Yi. With a mocking tone, he said, "Don't tell me the two of you intend to just watch and pick up the spoils." Hui Yudi coldly snorted, and without saying a word, she stepped forward to attack the dummy vine. Although she wasn't willing to travel with these people, she wasn't shameless enough to do so. Moreover, the other party wouldn't let her enjoy the fruits of their labor. Lin Yi had originally thought that for a delicate girl like Huiyuti, the martial technique she used would definitely be on the gentle side, just like Yao Jieli's water snake-like movement technique. After all, both of them were from the Morning Pride Academy. The martial technique they used shouldn't be too different. However, when Huiyuti made her move, his eyes suddenly lit up. The girl's martial technique was elegant with speed and decisiveness. It was even better than Renzhong Yuan and Yi Xiaotian. When he saw Huiyuti, who was like a butterfly, easily cut off a giant vine with one palm, Lin Yi couldn't help but smack his lips. He touched his chin and sighed, "You really can't judge a book by its cover." Looking at the four people flying up and down to deal with the dummy vine, although Lin Yi didn't want to help, he was also embarrassed to really stand on the side and watch the show. His figure immediately swayed and moved forward. However, he was purely acting. At first glance, it seemed that the giant vines were whistling around him. It seemed to be in imminent danger, but in fact, there was no threat at all. Lin Yi could deal with it easily with the butterfly micro steps alone. As for the super butterfly micro steps and the faster butterfly micro steps, it was purely overkill to use them at this time. Of course, Lin Yi wasn't just dodging. Occasionally, he'd make a move, but it was only when Huiyuti was in danger that he'd sneakily lend her a hand, giving her the finishing blow. It had to be said that this dummy vine was really fierce and terrifying. So many Yuanying stage perfection joined forces to besiege them, but they were still suppressed by it. Everyone was hit by the fire qi, and the situation could only barely be maintained at 50-50. If they were not careful, they would all be wiped out. Lin Yi took this opportunity to carefully observe. Although these four people were all at the Yuanying stage perfection, when they really fought, Huiyuti was the strongest, followed by Renzhong Yuan and Yi Xiaotian, and Yao Jieli's strength was the weakest. In a short moment, Yao Jieli had been hit by the giant vine from the back, and she spat out a mouthful of blood on the spot. If it weren't for the cyan soft armor to offset most of the damage for her, she might have died on the spot. In contrast, Renzhong Yuan and Yi Xiaotian had a defensive martial skill like the Golden Bell, so they were slightly calmer than Yao Jieli, but they were not much better. The damage that the Golden Bell could withstand was limited, and the power of these giant vines had reached this critical point. Once it was broken, the two of them would not feel good either. Among the four people, Huiyuti's performance was the most dazzling. She did not have the defense of the Golden Bell, and her movement technique was not as weird as Yao Jieli's. Every move was beautiful but could quickly subdue the enemy. Before this, it was hard for Lin Yi to imagine that a weak woman who knew how to act coquettishly could be so powerful. Every time a giant vine got close to her, she did not dodge or avoid it. Now, more than a dozen giant vines had been broken under her feet. This result was more than the other three people combined. After Renzhong Yuan and the others saw Huiyuti's performance, they couldn't help but feel a little embarrassed. As a man, if they were defeated by a woman at this time, they would be laughed at. Especially Renzhong Yuan, how could he have the face to pursue Huiyuti in the future? She just casually mentioned it, and he was ashamed to death. What he didn't know was that Huiyuti's extraordinary victory was at least partly due to Lin Yi, who had helped her out from behind the scenes. Otherwise, she might have been injured like Yao Jieli. Ah? Renzhong Yuan immediately roared like a madman, and the protective golden bell covering his body suddenly exploded. The giant vines within a radius of 50 feet were all shattered into powder in an instant. A large number of people were killed and injured in an instant. Chapter 4673. If one did not understand it in advance, the enemy would suffer a great loss. Even if he underestimated the enemy, he might be injured. It was indeed a brilliant martial art from East Continent Academy. After Renzhong Yuan, Yi Xiaotian also did the same thing. The protective golden bell suddenly exploded another giant vine. In this way, more than half of the nearly 100 giant vines of the dummy vine were removed. The pressure on everyone was greatly reduced, and it was obviously not as difficult to deal with as it was at the beginning. After fighting bitterly for another incense stick of time, the dummy vine was finally destroyed by everyone. At this time, except for Lin Yi, everyone was injured. Needless to say, Yao Jieli was the weakest. Renzhong Yuan and Yi Xiaotian took the initiative to explode the protective golden bell. Although the effect was great, they also lost the means to protect themselves. After that, they were injured one after another. As for Huiyuti, under the special care of Lin Yi, her injury was the lightest. She was only slightly scratched, which was negligible. Humph, a follower who only knows how to take advantage of others, useless. Yao Jieli, who was the most seriously injured, glared at Lin Yi. She wanted to target Huiyuti the most, but unfortunately, the pile of giant vines at the opponent's feet really made her unable to speak. Who asked her to be less than a fraction of the opponents? We didn't expect him to be of much use in the first place, and we'd be thankful if he didn't drag us down. Anyone with even a little bit of self-awareness and shame would know what to do now. Continuing to follow us with a thick face is going to get us killed. Renjong Yuan said with a meaningful look. The meaning of his words was obvious. He wanted to drive Linny away. He wanted this follower to know the difficulties and retreat, so as not to ruin the good things between him and Huayudi. Senior brother Ren is right. Huayudi suddenly nodded at this time. Linny paused slightly when he heard this, but Renjong Yuan was instantly overjoyed. Even Huayudi said this, which meant that she had seen the performance of the battle just now, and had finally recognized who the useless trash was, and who the thigh she should hug tightly was. Still not leaving? You don't know what's good for you, do you want us to send you off? Renjong Yuan grinned at Linny. His face was full of schadenfreude. Linny raised his eyebrows. Just as he was about to speak, Huayudi suddenly said, "Let's go. This place is too dangerous. I don't want to go. You guys can go by yourselves." Huayudi didn't even look at the crowd after she finished speaking. He gave Linny a look. He turned around and left. Ah? No. What was going on? I was talking about this brat just now, not you, junior apprentice sister you die. Please don't misunderstand. Renjong Yuan was dumbfounded for a moment before he came to his senses. He immediately wanted to chase after her. I know, this is my own idea, it has nothing to do with you guys. I wish you all good luck. Huayudi had already made up her mind. She was clearly prepared to use this as an excuse to get rid of everyone. She didn't want to waste her time with them anymore. It was okay for her, but the trial time for Linny, who was at the peak of the early nascent soul stage, was not as long as a month. What? Senior apprentice sister Hua, you don't want the everlasting root anymore? This time, even Yao Jelly was shocked. The everlasting root was the dream of all of them. To say that Huayudi didn't care about it was absolute nonsense. This was a rare opportunity to find the everlasting root. How could she give it up halfway because of such a small matter? Huayudi stopped in her tracks and nodded at them with a seemingly sincere expression. She admitted, "This is your fate and fortune. I don't have this fortune. If you don't have this strength, then don't even think about it. I still have this bit of self-awareness." Humph, coward. Yao Jelly's expression changed. Huayudi's words were basically pointing at the mulberry tree and scolding the locust tree. Her strength was definitely stronger than hers. She was indirectly scolding her for having wishful thinking. Don't worry, I'll protect you. Don't worry, I definitely won't let you get hurt. Renjong Yuan hurriedly patted his chest as a guarantee. Linny glanced at him playfully. This guy was already in a sorry state. He hadn't even wiped off the blood on his face, yet he still had the nerve to pat his chest. He really didn't know what to say, there's really no need. It's too dangerous here. The dummy vine is already so difficult to deal with. It almost wiped out all of us. And this is just the beginning. I don't want to take this risk. You guys don't have to persuade me anymore. Huayudi's tone was firm. Renjong Yuan still didn't give up and wanted to persuade her a few more words. However, Yao Jelly, who was at the side, spoke up first. All right then. Since senior sister Hua is so afraid of death, we can't force you. Let's say goodbye here. We'll meet again someday. The reason why she specifically invited Huayudi to join them was not out of kindness. It was purely because she was afraid that this little girl and Linny would sneak a step ahead of them and find the everlasting route before them. And now, based on the map and the current situation, there was only one route. As long as Huayudi didn't follow them, there was no chance of finding the everlasting route. Since the outcome was already decided, what else did she have to worry about? With her and Huayudi's irreconcilable relationship, would she still be worried that the other party wouldn't be able to get the everlasting route and wouldn't be able to get a share of the loot? All along, although Yao Jelly and Huayudi were known as the Morning Pride duo, in reality, she had always been inferior to the other party. This was because her grandfather's power wasn't as great as Lu Ziyu's, and because she wasn't as strong as the other party. Even when it came to looks, which women cared about the most, she was still inferior to the other party. Not only did she hate this woman who suppressed her in all aspects, but she even wished for the other party to die. If curses could be used, Huayudi would have long been cursed by her to the point where she would never be able to reincarnate. Moreover, this time, it wasn't just Huayudi alone. She also brought along a burden like Linny to make up the numbers. With this brat's identity as Shanghai Tianhua's direct disciple, she couldn't kill him. What if he didn't have eyes and wanted a share of the loot? Although this was purely wishful thinking, it was still a problem that had to be faced. Now that Huayudi took the initiative to quit, Linny naturally couldn't stay. Even if he wanted to stay, everyone would definitely kick him out. Suddenly, there were two guys who wanted a share of the loot. For Yao Jieli and the others, this was exactly what they wanted. Yes, she couldn't wait for the two of them to get away as far as possible. Renjong Yuan looked at Yao Jieli and then at Hui Yudi, who turned her head and left. He still wanted to try to save them. After all, this West Island trial was a rare opportunity to get along. After this village, he didn't know if there would be another chance like this. Chapter 4674. At the same time, Yi Xiaotian also glanced at Hui Yudi with greed. He did have some thoughts about Hui Yudi, but he was not stupid. With his identity and background, it was not a problem to have a mistress other than Yao Jieli, but this mistress would definitely not be Hui Yudi. Unless Hui Yudi had fallen, or her master, Lu Ziyu, had completely lost his power, why would she follow him, Yi Xiaotian? He had no intention of giving up on Yao Jieli. This girl was much more exciting when she was coquettish than those so-called girls. Moreover, their families were old friends. Coveting Hui Yudi was purely a fantasy. The most important thing now was to serve Yao Jieli well. Only then would he be able to obtain more benefits and benefits. Let's go. Hui Yudi nodded to Lin Yi, and the two immediately went back the way they came, parting ways with Yao Jieli and the others. Junior sister Yudi. Renjong Yuan shouted angrily, but the other party did not turn her head at all, and just waved her hand indifferently. Renjong Yuan watched helplessly as Hui Yudi left, especially with a potential love rival by her side. He suddenly had an urge to chase after her. He didn't want to give the two of them a chance to be alone. A man and a woman alone with Hui Yudi, this was a scene that would only appear in his dreams. However, Renjong Yuan could not take this step in the end. After Hui Yudi went back, he could still chase after her, but if he missed this opportunity, there would not be a second chance. Looking deeply at Hui Yudi's back, Renjong Yuan gritted his teeth and turned to follow the footsteps of Yao Jieli and Lu Ziyu. This time, he must get the longevity route. At that time, as long as he divided a little bit, he could let Hui Yudi throw herself into his arms. The two sides parted ways. Lin Yi and Hui Yudi walked for half an hour, until Lin Yi's divine sense could not lock on to the three people, and then he finally took a break. So they don't know about the Thunder Xian Ratan. I thought they were our competitors. Lin Yi suddenly said in a faint tone. Why should we tell them about such an important treasure as the Thunder Xian Ratan? Wouldn't that be looking for trouble for myself? The few of them aren't easy to deal with. If they really find the Thunder Xian vine, it's hard to guarantee that they won't have any thoughts that they shouldn't have. At that time, I will be outnumbered. Hui Yudi shook her head. Haha, that might not be the case. At the very least, that Renjong Yuan will help you. Lin Yi smiled, but he was even more certain in his heart. For the Thunder Xian vine this time, Hui Yudi was probably preparing to borrow his 5 elements physique. Otherwise, Renjong Yuan and the other two were all at the peak of the nascent soul realm, and they were all disciples of the East Continent College who knew each other well. Even if she did not have a good relationship with Yao Jieli, it should not be a big problem if it was just a cooperation. At least, it would not be as unreliable as Hui Yudi herself said. On the other hand, Lin Yi was just an expert at the peak of the early nascent soul realm. There was no friendship between the two sides. No matter how you looked at it, the three people were more suitable to cooperate with each other. The only difference was his 5 elements physique. However, what was the relationship between the 5 elements physique and the Thunder Xian vine? This was a problem that needed to be clarified. Of course, Lin Yi did not intend to open his mouth to ask at this time. When it came in handy, the other party would naturally say that talking too much now would do more harm than good. Hui Yudi was silent for a moment. After turning her head to look at Lin Yi, she changed the topic and said, Your strength seems to be very strong? Oh? Isn't it just the peak of the early nascent soul realm? In front of you experts at the peak of the nascent soul realm, this is considered strong? Lin Yi curled his lips and smiled. For many geniuses who can challenge those who are stronger than them, the strength on the surface is nothing. I believe that you are this kind of person. Hui Yudi smiled slightly, paused and said, Thank you for before. It was nothing. Lin Yi waved his hand indifferently. Previously, when they were dealing with the humanoid vine, although he secretly helped in the chaos, others like Renjong Yuan could not see it, but after a few times, Hui Yudi would definitely be able to feel it. Otherwise, she would be too slow. If that was the case, Lin Yi would really have to consider the matter of cooperation. If he cooperated with such a slow girl to find the Thunder Xian vine, it would be fatal. Can I ask, out of curiosity, what exactly is your strength? As a partner, I think we should first clarify this matter, so that we do not make mistakes during the operation. Hui Yudi looked at Lin Yi with a burning gaze. As you can see, Linny shrugged noncommittally. Of course, he would not reveal his true strength to a stranger he met for the first time. Moreover, there was no need for him to lie. At the very least, he was at the peak of the early nascent soul realm. There was no doubt about this. I am talking about your true strength. That humanoid vine, even the few of us could not escape unscathed. Only you were not injured. If you say that you are at the peak of the early nascent soul realm, I will definitely not believe it. Huayuti shook her head with certainty. Haha, I'm just good at body techniques. It can't hit me, so of course it won't get hurt. Linny smiled nonchalantly. He didn't bother explaining and kept his mouth shut. Huayuti looked deeply at Linny and did not continue to ask. Now was not the time to get to the bottom of it. Since the other party was not willing to confess, then it was enough to know. While the two were talking, they had already returned to a fork in the road. Huayuti took out a map from her backpack and compared it to the map. She nodded at Linny and said, "This is the way." After saying that, she immediately led the way. Although it was a bit unreasonable for a girl to take the risk to lead the way, who asked Linny to not know the route? Huayuti would not tell him this kind of thing in advance. After the previous incident, Linny had become a bit hidden in her heart. She still had to be careful. The sky gradually darkened and the road ahead began to become a bit difficult to walk on. In addition to the fact that they had been on the road for 6 hours, both Huayuti and Linny were somewhat tired. With their strength, it did not matter how long they walked. The key was to advance in this place. Every step they took had to be careful and vigilant. Facing the monotonous desert scenery, they had to be on high alert at all times. After all, the previous humanoid vine was only a small warning. Who knew what kind of terrifying existence they would encounter next? Under this kind of omnipresent spiritual pressure, even a peak nascent soul expert would not be able to withstand it for a long time. Chapter 4675. Therefore, they had to find a way to cross as soon as possible, so that even if they couldn't get the Thunder Shenrot Tan, they wouldn't return empty-handed along the way. It was dusk. Although the sky was gray, the outline of the setting sun could be vaguely seen. Linny couldn't help guessing what the gray was. It wasn't like sea fog, nor was it the unique miasma of the South Island. Looking carefully, there seemed to be a trace of blood in it, giving people the feeling that it was a cloud stained with blood. This was not impossible. After all, this was the ancient battlefield. Even if everything was lacking, there was absolutely no lack of blood and death chi. Suddenly, Huayuti in front of him let out a groan, and then she fell to the ground without warning. What happened? Linny couldn't help but be shocked. He didn't notice anything unusual, and the jade pendant didn't warn him. What the hell was this girl doing? Did she not give up and deliberately fell down to win his sympathy by pretending to be pitiful, so that she could take the opportunity to ask for more after she succeeded? Wasn't the hole in her brain a little too big? If he was such an easy person to be hooked, how could he bargain with her so quickly in the beginning? What was the point of doing this kind of superfluous thing? Looking at Huayuti with a strange expression, Linny stood behind her for a moment with his hands clasped. However, Huayuti didn't get up by herself, nor did she have any intention of calling for help. Did something really go wrong? Linny was a little surprised and walked to her with doubts. Only then did he find that Huayuti's forehead was sweating, and her face was pale and even a little black. She seemed to be in great pain. Even his breathing had started to become unstable. Linny couldn't help but be shocked again. An expert at the peak of the nascent soul realm couldn't even stabilize her breath in such a short time, which meant that a great change must have happened to her. But just now she just walked normally, and he didn't find any danger. Could it be that she had a relapse of some old disease? What's wrong with you? Linny quickly helped Huayuti sit up and let her lean on him, so that at least her breath could be a little more stable. Huayuti didn't answer. Her breathing was rapid and her eyes were lifeless. She probably couldn't even hear what Linny was saying, let alone reply. Linny frowned. He had no choice but to examine her body himself. However, when he lowered his head, he was shocked. Previously, it was difficult to notice it because the dress had covered it. It was only at this moment that she inadvertently moved. Only then did he realize that there was something hanging from her calf. At first glance, it looked like a small lizard, but it had 8 legs, and its head was triangular like a viper's. Its eyes were suffused with an alarming blue light. What is this? Linny's heart skipped a beat. Huayuti's sudden reaction had to have something to do with this thing. The thing was small, but it gave off an intimidating aura that wasn't any weaker than the mannequin. In Linny's opinion, it was even more than that. For a moment, Linny didn't know what to do. At this time, Huayuti suddenly rolled her eyes, and her head drooped down powerlessly. This gave Linny a big shock. This little girl wouldn't die just like that, right? He had spent so much time with Huayuti just for the Thunder Mystic Vine. Now, he hadn't even seen its shadow. If she was killed by a small lizard, how could he bear it? Linny quickly checked Huayuti's breath. Although it was weak, it hadn't completely disappeared. Only then did he let out a sigh of relief. As long as she wasn't dead, it was fine. He was also considered a miracle doctor, so he had a good way of treating injuries. Since the source of the problem was this lizard-like monster, the first thing to do before treating Huayuti's injury was, of course, to kill this thing first. Lin Yi's eyes were filled with murderous intent, and he immediately punched out without saying anything. His fist looked ordinary, but he had used 50% of his strength. This strange thing was able to defeat Huayuti in such a short period of time, so it was not ordinary at all. He absolutely could not underestimate it in the slightest. After punching out, Lin Yi originally thought that this lizard-like monster would either be killed by him or turn to attack him. However, to his surprise, facing his attack, the lizard-like monster just dodged to the side indifferently. It still didn't have any intention of letting go of Huayuti's calf. At the same time it dodged, its evil blue eyes looked up at Lin Yi from below. It seemed to be mocking and provoking. A mere beast also dared to be so savage. Lin Yi was instantly enraged. He no longer took it lightly. Accompanied by a low dragon roar, a small 5-element murderous aura suddenly shot out from his palm and hit the lizard-like monster in an instant. With a chi sound, the lizard-like monster was hit head-on by the 5-element murderous aura. Only then did it finally let go of Huayuti's calf. After rolling on the ground a few times, it twitched wildly and died in the blink of an eye. Lin Yi looked at the corpse of the lizard-like monster on the ground. Such a small thing could actually force him to use his killer move. The ancient battlefield ruins were indeed full of danger. There were all kinds of strange threats everywhere. After dealing with the lizard-like monster, Lin Yi checked Huayuti's condition again. However, he found that at this moment, her breath had become increasingly weak. If this continued, she might really die. At this moment, Huayuti's calf, which had originally been as smooth and white as jade, had turned purplish-black under the illumination of the moonlight. In particular, the wound that had been bitten by the lizard monster was continuously oozing out a terrifying black liquid, and there were faint signs of rotting. Poison! Lin Yi's heart skipped a beat. Although he could roughly judge from the appearance of the lizard-like monster, at this moment, he really saw that the poison was acting up. Moreover, it was acting up so violently. This was really troublesome. If it was just a simple injury, even if it involved the internal organs, it would not be a big deal in the hands of Lin Yi. After all, he had the universal true qi. However, it was hard to say if she was poisoned. Just the universal true qi alone was not enough. If it was not handled properly, Huayuti's leg would be completely crippled. She might even lose her life. Lin Yi may be a miracle doctor, but that was limited to the common world. He didn't know anything about the weird poisons on this island, and he'd been busy practicing for the past 2 years. He'd never had the time to do any systematic research, especially when it came to these weird spirit beasts. He'd never even heard of them before, so how was he supposed to treat them? Chapter 4676. Senior, do you know what this thing is? Helpless, Lin Yi had no choice but to seek help from the ghost, the former Azure Dragon. This guy should know everything about spirit beasts. Well, strictly speaking, this thing is not a spirit beast, but an insect subject. The ghost thing pondered for a moment. This is an insect? Lin Yi paused as he looked at the carcass on the ground. No matter how he looked at it, it looked like a mutated venomous lizard. He didn't expect it to be an insect. That's right. If I remember correctly, its full name should be eight-legged tooth insect. Although its intelligence isn't very high, its body is highly toxic, and the toxicity is very strong. Even a profound ascending stage master can be easily taken down. The ghost explained. Even a profound ascending stage master can be taken down? Lin Yi was shocked. In his impression, ordinary poisons had no effect on high-level cultivators. Many poisons could easily kill ordinary people, but the effect was greatly reduced for high-level cultivators. Especially at the nascent soul stage, it could be said to be no threat at all. He didn't expect the toxicity of this strange thing to be so strong. Yes, this thing is a rare poison. You can keep its corpse. Maybe it will come in handy in the future. It may be used for alchemy or forging. The ghost thing said. Okay. Lin Yi moved the body of the eight-legged tooth clawworm into the space of the jade pendant. Then he looked at Huayuti, whose breath was getting weaker and weaker. What about her? If we don't think of a countermeasure quickly, she will die. From the beginning until now, he'd spent so much effort following her for so long, and he hadn't even seen the shadow of the Thunder Xian vine. If Huayuti really died in a place like this, then he'd really be screwed. What should we do? It's very simple. You just need to help her cure the poison. The ghost thing said indifferently. How do I cure this? Linny couldn't help but scratch his head. This is not difficult. The most primitive method will do. Use your mouth to suck it out. The ghost thing laughed. Huh? Use my mouth? Linny almost choked. He coughed for a while and said, Cough. Wouldn't I be dead then? Senior, didn't you just say that this poison can even easily kill a profound ascending stage master? Others will die, but you won't, the ghostly thing said in a confident tone. Why? Linny was surprised. Don't think that I don't know that you're immune to all poisons. Didn't that old Lin make it for you? Your physique has been tempered since you were young. Now that you have become stronger, it will only become more stable. No matter how strong the poison is, it will be useless on your body, said the ghostly thing. You even know this? Linny was even more astonished. The ghost had been with him for quite some time now, but that was only a short time before he came to Sky Class Island. If he hadn't mentioned it before, there shouldn't be any reason for him to know about it. Especially since the matter of his immunity to poison had been exposed to Old Man Lin. Oh, when I had nothing to do, I casually looked through your past in your divine knowledge sea, so I still have some impression of this kind of thing. The ghostly thing curled its lips indifferently. What? You peeped at my memory? Linny was shocked. He had never thought that there would be such a thing before. If it could casually look through his own memory, then wouldn't there be no secrets in front of this ghostly thing? This feeling of being seen was too scary, right? Although this ghostly thing was not an outsider. At least at this stage, Linny and it were bound together. But even so, this feeling of having all his secrets seen by someone else. It really made people shudder just thinking about it. Hey, I have nothing to do anyway, so I used it to kill time and relieve boredom. Don't worry, I'm not interested in your little secrets. The ghostly thing laughed. Can I ask, Senior, where did you learn this shameless behavior from? Why do I always meet such bad people? Linny was suddenly speechless. He didn't feel it when he was not familiar with it, but now that he was familiar with it, he suddenly realized that this ghostly thing was also a playful old man. He couldn't help but think of the old man. Hee, don't mutter, kid. Hurry up and treat her poison, it's already spread. If you don't hurry up, this girl will die for sure. The ghostly thing interrupted with a strange laugh. All right. Seeing that the purplish-black part on Huayuti's calf was getting bigger and bigger, Linny didn't dare to think about those useless things anymore. After laying Huayuti flat on the ground, he immediately clenched his teeth and lay down. At this moment, Huayuti's wound had already melted, and black liquid was constantly flowing out. When Linny got closer, he almost vomited on the spot. He used the last of his willpower to resist the nausea and put his mouth on it. While treating Huayuti's poison, Linny secretly felt helpless. He thought to himself that when this girl recovered, he had to renegotiate with her about splitting the profits. Otherwise, she would have sucked the poison for nothing. Lying on Huayuti's calf, Linny didn't feel the slightest bit enchanting at this moment. Although he had a super strong physique that was immune to poison, the poison of the eight-legged tooth crackworm was really terrifying. Every time he sucked from Huayuti's wound, there would suddenly be a burning pain on his mouth. After a while, the poison in Huayuti's body finally subsided. The originally purplish-black calf gradually recovered a trace of color, and the somewhat weak breath also began to stabilize. However, this made Linny suffer. Although the poison had no effect on him, the burning pain was real. Not to mention anything else, his mouth was almost numb now. Although his mouth was numb, Linny didn't dare to relax at all. Although Huayuti's condition was showing signs of improvement, the poison of the eight-legged tooth crackworm could easily kill a profound ascending stage master. Even a little bit of it could take Huayuti's life. What's more, although Linny was immune to poison, he didn't dare to take it lightly. What if the poison was too overbearing and he was accidentally poisoned? Linny was lying next to Huayuti's leg to treat her poison. At this moment, two sneaky figures suddenly appeared not far away. They were two men. Although they didn't wear a uniform, there was a badge with a double cloud spreading wings pattern on their neckline. This kind of badge was also worn by Renjong Yuan and Yi Xiaotian. It was the symbol of Soaring Cloud Academy. Chapter 4677. Because of their low strength, these two people were probably at the bottom of all the participants of the West Island trial. They were disciples of the East Continent Soaring Cloud Academy, and they could follow the envoy to the West Island, but their strength was actually at the bottom of all the participants. This was really a rare thing. The sun was setting, and it was getting dark at this time. The two people's strength was low, so no matter what kind of ferocious creatures or other trial takers they encountered, it could be a fatal threat to them. So it was not strange that the two of them walked so stealthily. Every step they took was very careful. The two of them moved forward bit by bit, while muttering and complaining to each other. Alas, I don't know what Brother Ren and Brother E are thinking. They specially brought us 2 followers to the West Island, but now they leave us behind at such a critical time and let us act alone. It's such a dangerous place. If we're not careful, we'll be killed. Hey, Sun Baolu, are you stupid? This trial is a rare opportunity for Brother Ren and Brother E to be alone with beautiful women. How could they take us with them and ruin the fun? One of the men wearing a bamboo hat curled his lips and said. They don't have to leave us behind on purpose. At worst, they can follow them a little further. We won't disturb their good time, and we can help them carry things. Didn't they do the same when they went out to play before? Sun Baolu shook his head helplessly, then lowered his voice and said, according to my speculation, in fact, Brother Ren and Brother E didn't leave us behind for this thing at all, but to find some very rare treasures of heaven and earth. What do you think, Liujo? Hiss, now that you mention it, I really remember. Before we came to the West Island, when Brother E and Sister Yao talked, I heard a few words. It seemed that they were really looking for some treasures of heaven and earth. They had prepared for it for a long time in advance. They just kept it a secret from us. Liujo couldn't help but feel a little resentful when he said this. Humph, I already guessed this. This is the fate of us followers. Good things never happen to us, but bad things happen to us every time. Hey! Sun Baolu laughed at himself. This was something that couldn't be helped. Who asked these people to have no background? In order to establish a foothold in the Eastern Continent College, which was a dangerous place like the Dragon Pool and the Tiger Cave, one must have either strong strength or a deep background. Otherwise, they would be swallowed whole. People like them could only rely on young masters like Renjong Yuan and Yi Xiaotian. There was no other way out. The two of them grumbled softly as they carefully explored forward. Suddenly, Liujo stopped in his tracks. His eyes were looking straight ahead, and his mouth was agape for a long time. What are you doing? Was he possessed by a ghost? Seeing this, Sun Baolu couldn't help but feel a little nervous. He thought they were being targeted by some unknown monster. With their strength in the peak of Gold Core realm, once such a situation occurred, the outcome would be really terrible. No. Look over there, Liujo stammered. He couldn't utter a complete sentence for a long time as if he was having a convulsion. He pointed ahead in a daze. Liujo looked in the direction of his finger. With just a glance, he was stunned and couldn't come back to his senses for a long time. After a long time, he gasped in disbelief and whispered, "Oh, my God. The world is really big and full of strange things. In this kind of place, we can actually meet someone who is having sex in the wild. My God. This woman's body looks so fucking hot. It's more than that. Don't you think this woman looks familiar?" Liujo continued to stare straight ahead and said. "Hiss, now that you mention it, it's true. Oh, my God, isn't this Huayuti, one of the 2 beauties in the morning? Why isn't she with Brother Ren? Instead, she is having sex with another man here. I didn't know she was so wild before." Sun Baolu was shocked. More than wild, she is almost unrestrained. I used to think that this girl was an iceberg snow lotus, always with a pure and holy look. I didn't expect that she would become so coquettish when she came to West Island. She actually let that man lie under her skirt and suck. My eyes are so dazzling." Liujo rubbed his hands with his eyes shining. This kind of scene was so exciting that any man couldn't hold it. TSK. I also want to go and lick her, even in my dreams. Sun Baolu couldn't help but swallow his saliva. Hey, do you think I don't want to? Liujo rolled his eyes at him and said with pity, all the good cabbages are taken by pigs. It's a pity that no matter how wild this little hussy is, she is doomed to have no share in it. If you dare to have this wicked idea, aren't you afraid that Brother Ren will kill you? I'm just saying. I don't have the guts. Sun Baolu shrank his neck and swallowed a few mouthfuls of saliva greedily before saying, but this Huashuelian is actually having sex with another man here. Isn't our Brother Ren wearing a big green hat on his head? Should we go and take care of it? Hearing this, Liujo couldn't help but be a little tempted. At this time, if he went and took care of it, wouldn't it be a good opportunity to take advantage of them? Even if he couldn't touch them, at least he could see them more clearly. After all, they were the 2 beauties in the morning, goddesses in the eyes of ordinary disciples like them. However, Liujo immediately suppressed this tempting idea. He patted Sun Baolu's head angrily and said, "Do you dare to go? That guy is a master of the nascent soul stage." At this time, in order to treat Huayuti's poison, Lin Yi had to circulate his true qi all the time to prevent the poison from invading his body. Although his body was immune to poison, there was always a higher mountain. What if the poison of this 8-legged tooth insect was more violent than imagined? There was no chance for this kind of thing to happen again. Once something went wrong, he would definitely die. Therefore, at this moment, the aura of a master at the peak of the early stage of the nascent soul stage was fully revealed. Even though there was a distance between them, Li Yuzhou and Sun Baolu could see it clearly. The two of them were only in the gold core stage. At this time, of course, they didn't dare to jump out and ruin the good thing. Put yourself in their shoes and think about it. If they were having sex in the wild and were disrupted, they would definitely kill in anger. This man was a master at the peak of the early stage of the nascent soul stage. The two of them together were not his opponent, not to mention Huayudi, a master at the peak of the nascent soul stage. They didn't dare to move. What do we do? Are we just going to sit here and watch? Sun Baolu frowned unwillingly. Since he couldn't take advantage of it, he could only enjoy it from a distance. Chapter 4678. Ugh, then there's nothing to say. Let's run quickly? Sun Baolu shrank his neck. Compared to admiring Hua Xuelian's coquettish look, his own life was more important. Don't worry. Leave some evidence before we run. Later, we will let Brother Ren enjoy it. Li Yuzhou said as he took out a digital camera from his backpack. In order to curry favor with Huayudi, Ren Zhongyuan had spent a lot of money to buy it from the Central Chamber of Commerce. Unfortunately, Huayudi didn't even look at it before throwing it back. So, after going around in circles, it still ended up in the hands of his follower. No matter where Ren Zhongyuan went, his follower had to carry it for him. This time was no exception. Click click. Li Yuzhou took 2 pictures in a row in front of him, then he turned around and ran without saying anything. Even if the other party was busy having sex in the wild before and didn't find him, he would definitely be discovered this time. If he didn't run, he would be a fool. Sun Baolu looked at it reluctantly, then he followed Li Yuzhou and fled in a hurry, for fear that the other party would recover. They didn't know that the two of them had been noticed by Lin Yi from the beginning. Although the distance was not close, and he couldn't hear what the two of them were talking about, Lin Yi had received training since childhood. Always observing the environment was the introductory course of an assassin. Even without divine sense, he could clearly detect the two of them. However, he didn't dare to further lock with divine sense at this time. After detecting the two of them, he felt that a light flashed, and then the two of them ran away. It wasn't that Lin Yi didn't want to get up and catch these two sneaky guys. The problem was that he was busy treating Huayudi's poison. He must be fully focused at all times. He didn't even dare to release his divine sense. He was afraid that he would be disturbed if he was distracted. How could he stop halfway? These two weren't important to Lin Yi, so it didn't matter if they ran. As long as they didn't do anything bad, the urgent matter at hand was to suck out all the poison in Huayudi's body as soon as possible. Otherwise, not only this chick would suffer. Even the Thunder Schwanting would definitely have no chance. After another half an hour, Lin Yi's whole mouth was completely numb by the venom. Huayudi's calf regained some color, and it wasn't as ghastly as before. Huayudi moaned as she opened her eyes. This was a normal reaction after most of the toxins in her body had been sucked out by Lin Yi. However, she immediately screamed when she opened her eyes. Anyone who woke up and saw a man burying his head under her skirt would definitely have the same reaction. Huayudi was both angry and embarrassed. She screamed and lifted her leg to kick Lin Yi. However, the result made her even more frightened. She suddenly found that she couldn't move her legs. At this moment, although Lin Yi had helped her suck out most of the poison, there was still some left. Moreover, the leg was the most important part of the bite. Even with Lin Yi's strong physique that was immune to poison, just helping her suck out the poison made his mouth numb. If she could lift her leg and kick him at this time, then she would really be seeing a ghost. You big pervert. What have you done to me? Why did you fix my body in place and not let me move? Huayudi was so embarrassed and angry that tears came out. She had a pure body and had never even held a man's hand before. How could she endure such a sudden and huge stimulation? At this moment, she wanted nothing more than to perish together with this shameless beast, Lin Yi. Huh? What nonsense are you talking about? Lin Yi was stunned when he heard this. He then raised his head with a strange expression. The worst thing was that the corner of his mouth hadn't been wiped clean, and there was saliva that could easily make one's imagination run wild. What made people even more speechless was that his mouth was a little numb. At this moment, he spoke in a muffled voice. People would think that he had swallowed something in his mouth. Huayudi almost fainted when she saw this. At this moment, not only her legs, but her entire lower body was basically numb. Moreover, Lin Yi just happened to be lying under her skirt. She thought that Linny had been sucking on her private parts. Immediately, she was shocked and angry. She scolded, "You shameless. You bastard. Fuck." Linny finally understood the misunderstanding and immediately stood up. He coldly stared at Huayuti and said, "Little girl, what do you want? I risked my life to help you suck out that strange worm's fatal poison, and you still call me a shameless bastard? Fine. Since it's like this, you can slowly lie here. I won't accompany you anymore, bye-bye." The relationship between Linny and this little girl couldn't be said to be good. This time, he had risked his life to treat her poison, which was already extremely benevolent. He didn't expect that the other party didn't even know a fart and actually scolded him. Really, a good person can't be a good person. A dog that bites Lu Dongbin doesn't recognize a good person's kindness. Seeing that after Linny finished speaking, he patted his butt and left without hesitation, Huayuti suddenly remembered that she seemed to have been bitten by something. Then, very quickly, her whole body went numb and she fainted. So it really wasn't Linny's doing? Did I misunderstand him? Thinking of this, Huayuti subconsciously moved. She discovered that other than the leg that wanted to kick Linny, although the other parts of her body were a little numb, they weren't completely immobile. Especially the upper half of her body that was less affected by the poison, she could basically move freely. Ah! Huayuti was a little dumbfounded. She wasn't a one-track-minded idiot. The facts were in front of her, and it could be said that it was obvious. Just now, the poison of the strange worm could knock her down in the blink of an eye. With such a strong poison, if no one detoxified it for her, the consequences would be obvious. But now, her body was much better. This meant that Linny was indeed detoxifying her just now. It was just that because the poison was in a special place, this posture was more likely to be misunderstood. "Wait! You wait!" Huayuti didn't dare to hesitate anymore. She hurriedly screamed and wanted to get up to chase after Linny. Not only did she wrongly blame a good person, but if Linny really abandoned her in a fit of anger, with her current state, she couldn't even stand up. Being left here alone was simply impossible to call for help. At that time, if anything happened, the consequences would be unimaginable. "What else do you want?" Linny turned around and glanced at her. He said unhappily, "Isn't it exactly what you want for a shameless bastard like me to stay away from you? Lest I do something to you that can't see the light of day again. It's good to break up like this. Don't worry, I also save trouble. It's the best of both worlds. Don't go." Huayuti's pretty face blushed. If it wasn't for the veil covering her face, it could be seen that her face was so red that it was about to drip blood. She weakly muttered, "Sorry, I wrongly blamed you." Chapter 46-79. Linny turned around and walked back to Huayuti's side. He didn't really want to leave. After all, leaving a weak girl who couldn't move in this dangerous wilderness was something he couldn't do. "Thank you." Huayuti thanked him softly with a red face. At the same time, she was a little surprised. She thought that Linny would really leave after suffering such injustice. She didn't expect him to be so easy to talk to. She really didn't see it before. She didn't know why, but after this misunderstanding, Huayuti felt that Linny had become a lot more reliable. At the very least, it was a completely different image compared to the one she had when she was trying to extort money from him. Unexpectedly, just as her impression of him improved, Linny's next words caused the trust that she had built up with so much difficulty to collapse by a lot. "You're welcome, but we have to have a good talk." "Talk about what?" Huayuti had just woken up. Her head was still a little swollen, and she couldn't react for a moment. "Of course it's to have a good talk about repayment. You can't be so naive to think that I would save you for nothing, right? In any case, you're a genius disciple from Morning Pride Academy. You shouldn't be so ignorant of the ways of the world, right?" Linny looked at Huayuti with a sneaky smile. "Ah, you want..." Huayuti saw Linny's expression and immediately became nervous again. It was just that before, it was pure shock and anger, but now, she couldn't help but have some shyness of a young girl. She was originally beautiful and moving, but now, she became even more covetous. There was a kind of temptation that could be plucked by anyone. Linny's eyes couldn't help but light up. "This time, I almost lost my life when I helped you suck out the poison. I believe that you understand the dangers involved the most. Of course, the repayment is not lacking." Linny paused. Looking at Huayuti's little heart thumped wildly, then said, "So, when the time comes, we have to change the way we split the Thunder Shen Vine. You get 20 and I get 80. You don't have any objections, right?" "Ah? You?" Huayuti was dumbfounded. The nervousness and shyness in her heart disappeared in an instant. She thought that Linny had seen something he shouldn't have seen under her skirt and wanted to use this opportunity to make some unreasonable demands. After all, it was common for someone to repay a life-saving debt with their body. Huayudi had always been very confident in her looks, and it was because of this that she had to cover her face. Otherwise, men would chase after her like flies that couldn't be driven away, and there would be too many troubles. Under such circumstances, she naturally thought that Linny would also make such a request, but she never expected that. This guy had been beating around the bush for half a day just to say this. Huayudi was both angry and amused at the same time. Looking at the serious Linny, she was speechless for a long time. She really didn't know how to describe this feeling. If she was someone from the secular world, she might say, "I've even taken off my pants, and you're showing me this? What about me? This is already a very small return, okay? Think about it, I saved your life. Is there a problem with that?" Linny said with a matter-of-fact expression. Huayudi didn't know why, but she was suddenly in a good mood, and the corners of her mouth curled up as she said, "No, we agreed on 370. This is this. Then didn't I let you suck it for nothing?" Linny glanced at her. "Anyway, I'm done. It's useless for you to go back on your word. 370 is 370. As for you detoxifying me, I can think of another way to repay you," Huayudi said with a proud smile. She didn't feel this way before, but now she felt that bickering with Linny wasn't a bad thing. "Hee. Are you burning the bridge after crossing the river?" Linny couldn't help but laugh, but his face still had a victorious expression. He said with a smile, "It's a pity that you're burning the bridge a little too early. You haven't even completely crossed the river. Aren't you digging your own grave by burning the bridge now?" "What do you mean?" Huayudi looked at Linny's expression and couldn't help but twitch. "It's very simple. Aren't you still so numb that you can't move? This means that the poison hasn't been completely sucked out. What I helped you just now was only some of the poison left on the surface. However, during this period of time, some of the poison has already been absorbed by you. It has already integrated into your body and is difficult to remove. So, I estimate that in a few more hours, the poison will enter your vitals," Linny said with a faint smile. "Ah?" Huayudi was no longer in a good mood. She was instantly frightened by Linny and was at a loss of what to do. She said with a face full of fear, "Is this true or false? You're not lying to me. Whether it's true or false, won't you know after feeling it yourself? You should know better than me about this kind of thing. Take a look at how far the poison has developed in your body. If the poison has really been completely removed, why is your leg still unable to move?" Linny said indifferently. This. Huayudi didn't dare to be negligent. She carefully felt it according to Linny's words and her heart sank. It was just as Linny said, the poison that hadn't been sucked out had already integrated into her body through her blood. If it continued to develop, even the gods wouldn't be able to save her. "How is it? Have you thought it through?" Linny crossed his arms and stood calmly at the side as he looked at her. "That Kaizi was right. You really are a eunuch." Huayudi couldn't help but be a little angry. She pitifully blinked her eyes and pouted. "I've already begged you so much, but you still want to take advantage of me. And it's this kind of advantage." "What? Then do you want me not to be a eunuch and take advantage of you in other ways? Or do you want me to just—" Linny heard this and couldn't help but smile playfully. "Ah?" Huayudi was suddenly speechless. Only then did she realize the ambiguity in her words. Her pretty face blushed again. This time, even her veil was slightly reflected. She quickly buried her head in her chest and said in a muffled voice, Okay. 280 is 280. Quickly help me detoxify. That's more like it. It may be a little painful next. You have to bear with it." Linny smiled and immediately knelt on the ground again. He put his mouth on the other party's wound. His mouth was originally numb, but now that he had rested for a while, it had completely recovered. "Humph." Huayudi let out a low moan as she felt Linny sucking on her lips. She blushed at her own reaction. Her legs were still numb, but she could more or less feel them now because of the large amount of toxins that had been expelled from her body. Chapter 4680. She didn't know what Linny's reaction was, but Huayudi was already blushing. She let a man lie under her skirt and suck on her wound, and she couldn't help but let out such an ambiguous moan. What was going on? As a girl with a pure heart, Huayudi was obviously very sensitive to this aspect of shame. After letting out a subconscious moan, she immediately gritted her teeth and held it in. She couldn't let out a second moan even if she died. Otherwise, how could she face Linny in the future? Just thinking about this kind of thing was embarrassing. However, after a short while, Huayudi's body suddenly trembled slightly, and she couldn't help but let out another moan. In fact, this couldn't be blamed on her. If Linny was simply sucking on her wound, she could actually barely endure it. However, at this moment, there was suddenly a warm vital energy in her body. It flowed through her meridians, and every time it flowed, it would bring something from her body that shouldn't be there. It was the poison that the 8-legged tooth clawworm had fused into her body. Not only was this feeling not painful at all, but it was also very warm and comfortable. In addition, as the poison decreased, the stimulation from Lin Yi's sucking on her wound became stronger. Huayuti couldn't help but feel like she was floating. When she came back to her senses, she felt that something was wrong with her whole body. What's wrong with me? Huayuti said in a daze as she resisted the comfortable and stimulating feeling that constantly attacked her scalp. However, this pitiful willpower was quickly shattered by the next wave of feeling. What was this girl thinking? Listening to Huayuti's faint moans, Lin Yi couldn't help but be a little speechless. He had painstakingly sucked out the poison for her, and at the same time, he had to control the all-purpose vital energy to swim in her body. He thought this process would be more painful, but he didn't expect her to sound like she was enjoying it. Although he was speechless, Lin Yi couldn't stop and say anything at this time. As long as Huayuti resisted and didn't move, he would let her do whatever she wanted. However, Lin Yi soon felt that he had made a mistake because he found that Huayuti's moans didn't stop. On the contrary, it showed signs of becoming more and more frequent and intense. It was simply out of control. Listening to this seductive voice, even Lin Yi couldn't help but feel a little restless in his heart. He couldn't help but curse in his heart. Although this chick was a little straightforward when they first met, most of the time she still had the temperament of an iceberg snow lotus. He didn't expect her to be so open at this time. Little did he know that it was because of the poison. Huayuti couldn't control her feelings at all. As a master of the peak Yuanying stage, the powerful restraint was not useful at this moment. It was completely the instinctive reaction of the body. However, even though she couldn't control herself, Huayuti's mind was still very clear. She could clearly see all of her reactions. She was so embarrassed that if there was a crack on the ground, she would have already crawled into it. Call me whatever you want. After I recover my ability to move, just don't kick me. Lin Yi muttered in his heart. He immediately concentrated on using his all-purpose true qi to eradicate the last bit of poison. Unexpectedly, just as he was about to succeed, Huayuti suddenly cried out again. A warm current seemed to be uncontrollable. Lin Yi's position was simply unbiased, and he just happened to be drenched. This scene came too suddenly. Lin Yi was completely caught off guard, and his whole body was immediately stunned. He faintly felt that it was somewhat familiar. After thinking for a long time, he finally remembered. It was the same situation when he was treating the young Miss Poison in the past. He was simply drenched to death. Lin Yi stared blankly for a long time and didn't move. After a long time, he lowered his head with a speechless expression. He eliminated the last bit of poison in the other party's body and silently stood up. At this moment, Huayuti's whole body was already limp. Even though she knew that she had regained consciousness, she still curled up on the ground and didn't dare to move. She had an ashamed look on her face. Needless to say, this chick looked even more beautiful at this moment. Lin Yi suddenly shook his head speechlessly. He thought to himself, the one who was drenched just now was me. I haven't said anything yet, and you're still shy. However, to be honest, Lin Yi didn't have much resistance or dissatisfaction with this matter. He didn't have much resistance in his heart either. Anyway, he didn't smell any strange odor, and after all, she was a rare beauty. In his opinion, this matter was a loss that he didn't know whether to laugh or cry. But in the eyes of other men, it might be a dream, so he just endured it. The two of them were silent for a long time. Lin Yi helplessly waited at the side, but Huayuti buried her head like an ostrich and didn't move. It was almost midnight. How long was this chick going to be shy? However, at this time, if it was any other girl, they would be ashamed. Huayuti's reaction was normal. Lin Yi thought about it and had to take the lead to break the silence. He comforted her, in fact, you don't have to be embarrassed. It's a natural reaction of the human body. I just gathered the poison absorbed from your body through the meridians and then used this method to expel it from your body. So it's expected. There's nothing to be shy about. These words were simply nonsense. It was just to find a justifiable excuse for Huayuti. In fact, it was not the case at all. The little bit of poison that her body had absorbed had already been crushed into powder by Lin Yi's 5 elements murderous aura. Compared to the original all-purpose qi, the 5 elements murderous aura had a more obvious healing effect. This was a new discovery that Lin Yi had just made during the process of curing the poison. In the past, except for people like Lin Yi who had the 5 elements physique, the 5 elements murderous aura was an extremely fatal existence for any cultivator. It was so fierce and overbearing that no one could withstand it. However, in the process of curing the poison, Linny suddenly discovered that the 5 elements murderous aura's healing effect was far stronger than the all-purpose chi. More importantly, it also had the characteristics of the all-purpose chi. As long as he controlled it well, it would not cause any harm to the opponent. In the end, it could be absorbed by the opponent. Simply put, it was simply an upgraded version of the all-purpose chi. It was extremely overbearing when used to attack, and it was always successful when used to heal. This was the best description for the 5 elements murderous aura. This sudden and unexpected joy made Linny rejoice. Being able to find the giant electric eel in the deep sea was simply a blessing that couldn't be cultivated for several lifetimes. The 5 elements murderous aura itself was an endless huge treasure. Linny shrugged his shoulders at Huayuti, who was still lying on the ground. He had already paved the stairs for her. If she still didn't get up, then he really didn't know what to do. Chapter 4681. In any case, he couldn't just lie down like this. Linny didn't want to waste time on this kind of thing. Looking at Huayuti's limp appearance, to be honest, Linny was also quite puzzled. He could understand the first few snorts, but why did it become like this in the end? Only God knew. He couldn't understand it himself. A voice popped up in Linny's mind just as he was cursing Linny. You've probably made her high. Puff. Cough, cough, cough. When he was immersed in thinking, this suddenly happened. Linny was almost scared crazy. He choked a few times before he could barely hold it in. He complained speechlessly, Senior Ghost, you scared me to death. How am I scared you? Didn't you say that only God knows? That's why I helped you analyze it. The ghost laughed strangely. There was even a hint of schadenfreude in its tone. Okay, but Senior, can you pay attention next time? Don't make me crazy. It's not good for you. Linny shook his head helplessly. He paused and added, Senior, your English is quite good. If I didn't know you were the former Azure Dragon, I would definitely fight with anyone who dared to say that you were a native of the heavenly stage island. I can even learn the ancient language of you humans without a teacher, let alone this kind of bird language. Do you believe it? The ghost said in a disapproving tone. Linny was speechless again. The existence of this ghost was really unreasonable. In addition to the most instinctive fighting and killing, it even had such a terrible talent for this kind of thing. How could the students in the secular world endure this? Just as Linny was communicating with the ghost, Huayuti seemed to understand Lin Yi's words just now. She reacted a little slowly. She blushed and whispered like a mosquito, Really? You're not lying to me? The reason why she was so shy was that she had been wondering whether she would be a fucking woman. No matter how innocent Huayuti was, she was still a nascent soul great circle expert. Moreover, she wasn't young at all. Although no one would mention this to her, she could still read books. Within the scripture depository of the Morning Pride Academy, there were all sorts of books, some of which were related to this aspect. There were also some very specialized books, specifically researching on how to dual cultivate with a man. After all, it was a female academy. There were bound to be some disciples who chose this path. It was also under such an atmosphere that Huayuti had once flipped through such books out of curiosity. Thus, she knew that some women would have such a reaction at that time. However, not all women would be like this. Only a small portion of them would be like this. She had always thought that she was very pure, so how could she be like this? If that was all, it would have been fine, but the problem was that she actually sprayed Linny all over Linny when he was treating her. How could he still have the face to go out and meet people, especially in front of Linny? No, what's in it for me to lie to you? Can you give me 10% more? Linny couldn't help but laugh in his heart. However, on the surface, he acted serious. Otherwise, he couldn't guarantee that this girl wouldn't be embarrassed to death. Right now, the most important thing was to hurry up and find the Thunder Xian Vine. He didn't have so much time to waste. After hearing Lin Yi's answer, Huayuti immediately heaved a sigh of relief. Although she was still a little shy, she wasn't as ashamed as she was before. Since this was a normal detoxification process, it meant that it wasn't her problem. It meant that she wasn't the kind of woman described in the books. That was enough. Lin Yi's expression at this moment had a bit of a smile that wasn't a smile. In fact, it was only because he was communicating with the ghost through his divine sense. However, in Huayuti's eyes, it naturally had a different meaning. This girl was so shy that she couldn't even lift her head. After finally finding a way out, she immediately blushed. Humph, it's all because of you. I'll deduct 10% from you. Let's make it 30-70. Huayuti mustered up her courage to look at Linny and said angrily. This time, Linny was completely speechless. What was wrong with this woman? He risked being buried with her to save her life, but in the end, she ate this little benefit back. Wasn't she turning hostile a little too fast? It seemed that the old saying was right. Only women and vile people were difficult to raise. What? Do you have an opinion? Huiyuti saw Lin Yi's strange expression and her pretty face blushed. She snorted and said, "Let me tell you, if I tell others about today's matter, for the sake of my reputation, my master will definitely kill you." Huh? Lin Yi suddenly widened his eyes. He was just wondering why this girl suddenly became a little unruly. In the end, when he suddenly heard this sentence, he almost choked to death. This kind of thing could actually be used to threaten him. What kind of strange thinking was this? If she went out now, didn't she know that the one who would be the most humiliated would be herself? Or was it really as she said, that she had always been cultivating, and her mental age was far younger than ordinary people, so she didn't understand the basic ways of the world? Seeing that Lin Yi was stunned by her words, Huiyuti's mouth curled up proudly. She finally got rid of the embarrassment from before. Her eyes curved into two delightful arcs, and she said with a proud smile, "Now you have nothing to say, right? Humph, then it's decided happily." Huiyuti was instantly in a good mood. These were the words that Lin Yi had used to mock her. Now, she could finally use them on Lin Yi. Giving him a taste of his own medicine, this kind of feeling was great. Hee, there's no use in going out. Who knows, it might even have the opposite effect. Lin Yi faintly smiled disapprovingly. What do you mean? Huiyuti looked at Lin Yi suspiciously. You said it yourself. Your master and the deputy island master of Shanghai Tianhua are good friends. Since I'm his personal disciple, who knows, after your master hears about this, he might simply push the boat with the current and directly marry you to me as a cultivation companion. At that time, there's no medicine for regret. Lin Yi slightly raised his eyebrows and smiled. In your dreams. Huiyuti's pretty face blushed slightly as she lightly spat. Her cheeks were once again filled with fiery clouds. The sensitive word, cultivation companion, caused her body to subconsciously go limp, and she instinctively recalled the embarrassing scene just now. Chapter 4682. You really know how to take advantage of the situation. If I give you a ladder, you can go to the sky, right? My master and deputy island master Shangguan are good friends, that's true, but you're deputy island master Shangguan's personal disciple. Huiyuti had a look of disbelief on her face, but when she said this, she suddenly froze. Not to mention anything else, Lin Yi's previous intimate performance with Shanghai Laner was real, and although his realm was only at the peak of the early stage of nascent soul, it could be seen from the previous fight with the humanoid vine that his real strength was by no means so simple. At least, he was an existence that could fight against enemies of a higher level. In addition, he just treated her with a magical method. Each and every one of these things was not something that an ordinary disciple of the North Island could have. As the saying goes, a great teacher produces a great disciple. A person like Lin Yi, no matter how one looked at it, could not be taught by an ordinary cultivator. The person who could be his master must be an unfathomable big shot, and the person in the North Island who met this condition seemed to be Shanghai Tianhua. You can't really be? Huiyuti couldn't help but change her expression, unable to hide her surprise, and asked. Almost. Lin Yi smiled indifferently. He did not intend to hide this kind of thing, nor did he intend to deceive Huiyuti. Although there was no official master-disciple relationship, in fact, everyone in the 3 pavilions of the North Island, from top to bottom, had long regarded him as the personal disciple of Shanghai Tianhua. Even Shanghai Tianhua himself had a similar attitude, otherwise he would not pay so much attention to Lin Yi, and would not take the initiative to try to help Lin Yi. If Lin Yi announced to the public that he was his personal disciple, his attitude must be tacit, and maybe even fake it for real. Is this a prophecy of mine? Huiyuti suddenly didn't know what to say. She had said this before to deal with Renzhong Yuan and the others, but she did not expect it to be true. It was so strange. This word is not used to describe a good thing, right? Don't bully me because I'm uneducated. In any case, I went to university properly. Lin Yi corrected him with a straight face. These words were a little shameless. It was true that he was cultured, but that was all learned before he debuted. As for going to school, it was simply a pretense. It was pure nonsense. University? Oh, okay. Huiyuti stared blankly for a moment, her eyes sizing up Lin Yi again, as if she wanted to see through all of his secrets. After a moment, her eyes suddenly lit up and she said, "That's right. Since you and Shangguan Laner are so close, then she must be a good match that Deputy Island Master Shangguan has designated for you. Say, if she finds out that you've done something with other girls outside, will Shangguan Laner kill you out of anger?" When she said this, Hui Yudi's tone was full of schadenfreude, as if she really felt that she had grasped hold of Lin Yi's weakness. After all, letting a direct disciple marry a descendant of a relative would make the relationship between the two parties closer and more reliable. This kind of thing could be seen everywhere on the Heaven Stage Island. Shangguan Laner was the pearl of Shangguan Tianhua. If she wanted to get married, the other party would either be a nephew of some super big shot, or a direct disciple of Shangguan Tianhua. There was no third choice. And this Lin Yi, although he was quite irritating at times, it was undeniable that this person was extremely outstanding in all aspects. However, it was undeniable that this person was extremely outstanding in all aspects. He was indeed a rare, one-in-a-million match. The pavilion closest to the water enjoys moonlight first. Shangguan Tianhua would definitely not let him marry another woman. No way, why would you want to kill me? Lin Yi didn't know what was going on. Why not? Absolutely, this is the most basic common sense. Which woman is willing to let her husband be with another woman, not to mention Shangguan Laner, the little princess of the North Island? Hui Yudi said with a face of certainty. Then do you know why I specifically came to participate in this low-level broken trial? Lin Yi smiled at Hui Yudi's determined gaze. Low-level? Broken trial? Hui Yudi was a little stunned. The West Island trial was ranked among the top 5 Heaven Stage islands, and the strength of this trial was generally at the nascent soul stage. Before, the dummy vine had already made them, the masters of the nascent soul stage, extremely embarrassed, and this was still a low-level broken trial? Of course, I can kill all the people here at will. Do I have nothing better to do? Why would I come to such a place to waste time? Although Lin Yi's tone was a little joking, there was no exaggeration in his words at all. This West Island trial was really not difficult for him. With Lin Yi's strength, the most suitable and valuable trial for him should at least be a dangerous place open to the masters of the profound ascending stage. There was no pressure at all now. It was simply whimsical to want to have a big harvest. If he could successfully get the Thunder Xian vine this time, he would be satisfied. As for breaking through in strength, he didn't even think about it. Hui Yudi couldn't help but roll her eyes at Lin Yi when she heard this. This tone was really big, and it sounded like a joke, but through all the previous things, she faintly felt that there was a little possibility. This guy was really unfathomable. She couldn't help but ask, then what are you doing here? Because of Shangguan Laner, she said she didn't want her best friend to marry others, so I can only reluctantly do it. Lin Yi shrugged with a smile. Best friend? Who is her best friend? Hui Yudi didn't respond for a while, and then suddenly remembered. She patted her head and said, Ning Xuefei? For most male cultivators, the main purpose of this West Island trial was not the treasures of heaven and earth, but to compete for the princess of West Island. However, she was a girl, so she didn't take this matter to heart from beginning to end. Until now, she suddenly remembered there was such a thing. Yes, who else could it be? Lin Yi smiled. Damn. Hui Yudi's eyes became more and more strange. She looked up and down at Lin Yi again, which almost made Lin Yi mad. Then she said faintly, isn't it said that only those very powerful people can have 3 wives and 4 concubines? What's more, Ning Xuefei is the princess of West Island. Even if a man marries her, she must be the master. Can he marry other women? Won't the people of West Island go crazy? Am I not powerful? Lin Yi replied half-jokingly. As for the second question, he directly ignored it. Although this was indeed a very tricky problem, as long as he was strong enough, everything could be solved. Chapter 4683. Not the so-called people of West Island. Since Shanghai Tianhua could see Lin Yi's potential, so could Ning Shangling. As long as she knew that Lin Yi could become the reliance of the whole West Island one day, then nothing would be a problem. Humph, I really don't know where your confidence comes from. I don't want to talk to you anymore. I won't deduct your share, okay? Hurry up. Hui Yudi said as she slowly got up from the ground. After being paralyzed for such a long time, Hui Yudi's body was somewhat not used to it. She staggered before standing firm, but fortunately, Lin Yi was standing next to her. He reached out and held her in his arms. Hui Yudi let out a low cry and subconsciously held Lin Yi's arm, then fell into his arms. With the soft and fragrant body in his arms, Lin Yi raised his eyebrows subconsciously, and the corners of his mouth curved into a playful smile. Apart from other things, this girl's body was quite elastic. Ah! Hui Yudi suddenly screamed and hurriedly escaped from Lin Yi's arms. She blushed and didn't dare to look at him. She lowered her head and walked forward desperately. Hey, be careful. Don't be bitten by some weird things like 8-legged tooth clasp worm again. Seeing this, Lin Yi hurriedly chased after her. It was midnight now, and he could only distinguish the scene by the faint starlight above his head. Besides, he was in such a dangerous place. He was fine, but it was still very dangerous for Huayuti. Huayuti hurriedly slowed down, but she still didn't dare to look back at Lin Yi. She was so shy not purely because she was hugged by Lin Yi, but because the smell of the man just now made her body a little soft instinctively. Subconsciously, the previous scene appeared in her mind. Although Lin Yi said it was a normal process of detoxification. But she was always a little worried that she would do it again. If so, she would really be ashamed to see others. What the hell is this girl doing? Behind him, Lin Yi shook his head helplessly. He had no choice but to quickly chase after them. At the same time, he deliberately spread out his divine sense in case something like this happened again. If this happened a few more times, time would be wasted. Huayuti lowered her head and didn't say a word. After that, Lin Yi didn't know what to say, so he simply kept his mouth shut. As a result, the atmosphere became somewhat ambiguous in the silence. Lin Yi was still alright. At most, he could only admire this girl's graceful back view from behind. However, Huayuti had obviously become somewhat reserved and unnatural. For some unknown reason? In her mind. The scene of Lin Yi lying on top of her unconsciously surfaced, especially the most embarrassing scene. Huayuti felt as if her whole body was on fire when she thought about it. She even felt as if her ears were about to be burnt off. It was too embarrassing. Although this matter was only between her and Lin Yi from beginning to end, and no one else would know, and there was an absolutely legitimate reason for detoxification, but even so, this also made Huayuti, who was an iceberg snow lotus in everyone's eyes, very embarrassed. It was precisely because of this that Huayuti no longer felt confident even when facing Lin Yi. Her speech was also not as free and unrestrained as before. Instead, it was replaced by a bashful and shy attitude. Even she herself was very unfamiliar with this kind of attitude of a little girl. This kind of thing was simply unimaginable in the past. She was a snow lotus on a mountain of ice. Any man, no matter how outstanding, would fall for her. Any man in front of her, no matter how outstanding, would be involuntarily attracted to her, and she would only disdain them. How could it be like now, where her mind was filled with the shadow of a man? The two of them walked in this strange silence. Lin Yi didn't say anything about this. Putting himself in her shoes, it was normal for a girl like Huayuti to be so shy when encountering this kind of thing. Only shameless women like Murongzhen or Si Tuqian would treat this kind of thing as a common occurrence. It was just that the silence along the way was really depressing to the point of making people uncomfortable. In reality, it wasn't only Lin Yi who felt this way. Huayuti's desire to break this strange silence was even greater than his. Otherwise, she would really be immersed in her shyness and embarrass herself to death. Unfortunately, she really couldn't think of any topic at the moment. At this moment, there was even an inexplicable hope in the depths of her heart that Lin Yi would be able to stir up some small topics that the two of them could argue about. This was because not only would that solve this awkward and depressing atmosphere, but she also felt that it was actually quite interesting to have a little argument with this fellow Lin Yi. However, this was just Huayuti's thoughts. After all, she and Lin Yi had only met for the first time. It couldn't be said that they truly understood each other. Especially in this kind of awkward atmosphere, whether it was her or Lin Yi, it was very difficult to find a suitable topic to divert their attention. Ambiguity would ferment, especially in this kind of awkward atmosphere. The feeling of ambiguity would constantly attack the depths of the mind. This was a normal person's natural yearning for beautiful things. Unless one's heart was dead, the mind would naturally think in this direction. Just like the current Huayuti, she simply felt that she couldn't extricate herself. Every once in a while, Huayuti would think of ways to sneak a glance at Lin Yi. Then, she would immediately turn her head back like a thief. It was a pity that her actions, which she thought was not a trace, were clearly seen by Lin Yi. He couldn't help but laugh. This girl was actually quite interesting. Along the way, the two of them walked like this for the whole night. It was different from the expected danger. This night's journey was not as dangerous as Lin Yi had imagined. After all, according to reason, many monsters were nocturnal, and the night was the most dangerous time. However, in reality, it was the opposite. This night, they did not encounter any accidents. Lin Yi couldn't help but guess, could it be because this was a desert? The night was silent until it was almost dawn. Lin Yi, who was walking at the back, suddenly moved. Accompanied by a light dragon roar, a five elements murderous chi suddenly swept over the head of Huayuti in front of him. Ah! Huayuti suddenly exclaimed. She thought that Lin Yi was going to do something to her. She quickly turned her head to look at Lin Yi. For some reason, she didn't know why, but she said with a red face, "What are you doing?" "What do you mean I'm doing?" Lin Yi looked at her strangely and pointed in front of her. Look for yourself. You are an expert at the peak of nascent soul stage. Can you walk a little more seriously? Chapter 4684. Huayuti suddenly felt a wave of fear when she thought about how this thing had unknowingly flown above her head without her even realizing it. She had seen the corpse of the eight-legged tooth crackworm before, and the deterrence that this thing gave off was even greater than the eight-legged tooth crackworm. However, at this moment, this thing had already been pierced through the middle of its body, and it was clearly dead. It was clearly the masterpiece of Lin Yi's five-element killing intent just now. Thank you. Huayuti blushed again. This time, it wasn't because of the awkwardness from before, but because of her own carelessness. A true expert must always be on guard, and because of the distracting thoughts lingering in her mind, she had obviously thrown this rule of survival to the back of her mind. You're welcome. Lin Yi smiled slightly. Ever since the eight-legged tooth crackworm incident, he had been using his divine sense to sense everything around him, so as not to repeat the same mistake. Moreover, Lin Yi had also accepted Huayuti as a teammate in his heart, and was not constantly on guard like before. The warning from the jade pendant naturally included her as a teammate. The two continued forward. After experiencing this shock, Huayuti's state was finally a little more normal, and she became more cautious as she moved forward. Not long after, she suddenly stopped. What's wrong? Lin Yi couldn't help but ask curiously, thinking that they had encountered some danger. However, there was nothing strange in his divine sense, and the jade pendant didn't have any intention of warning them. Something's wrong, I smell a familiar smell, and it's not far ahead. Huayuti frowned. A familiar smell? Lin Yi looked at her strangely. He then walked past her and said without looking back, it's this way, you can just follow behind me. I'm not lying to you, I'm very sensitive to smell. There's definitely danger ahead. Huayuti hurriedly shouted. I didn't say that I don't believe you, but even if there's danger, we still have to move forward, right? We can't just give up halfway because of a little danger, right? Lin Yi waved his hand. As he spoke, he had already walked far away. Huayuti clenched her teeth and hurriedly chased after him. Lin Yi was right. Even if they knew that there was a tiger in the mountain, they still had to go there. It was impossible to obtain a heavenly treasure like the Thunder Xian vine without taking any risks. After walking for less than 300 feet, Lin Yi suddenly felt a hint of alarm in his heart. At the same time, the jade pendant's warning sounded. He immediately shouted, retreat. Just as Lin Yi and Huayuti retreated, dozens of thick vines burst out of the ground. It was the dummy vine again. You have a good nose. Lin Yi calmly glanced at Huayuti. Because the dummy vine was hidden deep underground, even his divine sense could not detect it before it launched its attack. He did not expect that this little girl would be able to smell its scent from so far away. She had obviously only come into contact with it once, it was simply unimaginable. I've always been talented in this area. And I've also gone through special training in order to be useful in some special occasions. Huayuti replied. Well, in those places where divine sense can't be used, your nose can really come in handy. Lin Yi smiled slightly. What do we do now? Huayuti looked at the dummy vine in front of her and suddenly felt as if she was facing a great enemy. Although she had retreated in time under Lin Yi's reminder, the problem was that there was only one way. If they didn't get rid of this dummy vine, the Thunder Xian vine was simply an extravagant hope. Previously, she had joined forces with Renzhong Yuan and the others to attack. The four of them at the nascent soul stage barely managed to kill the dummy vine, and all of them were injured. And now, the giant vines of the dummy vine in front of them looked even thicker and more terrifying than the previous one. However, only she and Lin Yi were left. The situation was not optimistic no matter how one looked at it. There's nothing to do, just get rid of it. Lin Yi said as he dashed forward. The humanoid vines, hundreds of vines, started to dance in a frenzy, as if they were sharks that had smelled blood. They lashed out at Lin Yi with all their might. This frightening stance gave Huayuti a huge fright. If it were her, she might have been turned into minced meat with just one hit. However, Lin Yi did not dodge it. His body suddenly surged with a monstrous heat, and his whole person suddenly seemed like a fire god descending to the world, shrouded in raging flames, making people unable to look directly at him. Even if it was a plant that had become a spirit, it was still a plant after all. The dummy vine was most afraid of fire. After discovering that it was not good, it wanted to escape in a flash. The giant vines that were dancing wildly retreated faster and faster, and the offensive and defensive momentum was inadvertently completely reversed. However, the dummy vine was still too late to escape. Lin Yi's frenzied fire fist suddenly shot out, hitting its most vital root. Accompanied by a burst of strange screams, the entire dummy vine was completely enveloped in flames. In just a short period of time, this behemoth that even a nascent soul stage master was helpless against was completely burned, leaving only ashes on the ground. Huayuti looked at this scene dumbfounded, and her whole person was completely dumbfounded. She thought that with her and Lin Yi's strength, if they wanted to pass through here, they would have to fight a bloody battle. Maybe they would pay the price of serious injuries, but she did not expect that in such a short period of time, the dummy vine was so easily dealt with by Lin Yi. What are you still doing? Let's go. Lin Yi looked at her and said. Ah? Oh. Only then did Huayuti come back to her senses, and hurriedly followed the footsteps of Lin Yi. This time, it was her turn to look at Lin Yi's back, and she suddenly couldn't help but be a little lost in thought. Previously, it was still a little vague, but this time, she really saw it. Such a powerful and terrifying dummy vine was easily killed in a second. Although Lin Yi was at the peak of the early nascent soul stage, his real strength was far more powerful than an ordinary nascent soul stage master. In the Eastern Continent Academy, where geniuses came forth in large numbers, it was not strange to challenge someone of a higher level, but to surpass such an abnormal existence like Lin Yi, even in the entire Eastern Continent Academy, it was simply a monster. What made Huayuti's imagination run wild was not simply because of Lin Yi's strong performance, but this feeling of hiding behind a man and being protected by him in battle made her feel a little strange. This was something that had never happened before. Not to mention that with her strength, she rarely encountered real danger, and even if she did encounter it, although there was someone like Renzhong Yuan who repeatedly said that he would protect her, when it really came to a critical moment, he often couldn't even take care of himself, so how could he talk about protecting her? Only the current Lin Yi was truly protecting her. Chapter 4685. However, at least before she was poisoned and injured, Lin Yi didn't do anything in this regard at all. When he followed Renzhong Yuan and the others, he was just a bystander. After they parted ways, Huayuti was also the one leading the way. All these changes started after she was injured. Huayuti couldn't help but be a little lost in thought. If it wasn't for her injury, this guy would have been hiding behind and lazily picking up ready-made things. When there was nothing to do, he would just be a bystander. When there was a problem, he would stand up without hesitation. This guy was actually quite manly. But on second thought, Lin Yi might be afraid that he wouldn't be able to get the Thunder Xian vine if something happened to her, so he was so proactive and diligent. Huayuti suddenly shook her head with some worries. Apart from pure interest considerations, she didn't think that Lin Yi would like her. After all, from the beginning when they met, everything had been explained. Even if she wore a veil, other men's eyes would unconsciously light up when they saw her, but Lin Yi didn't. From the beginning to the end, he behaved very normally. Not only that, but when he asked for a share, he even extorted her. Especially when he used the opportunity to cure her poison, he didn't have the slightest intention of coveting her beauty. Instead, he asked for a share. Huayuti unconsciously let her imagination run wild. Humph, if it was another normal man who had such an ambiguous relationship with her, even if the Thunder Xian vine wasn't given to her, he would at least reverse the situation and let her take 80%. How could he be as stingy as Lin Yi? He didn't chase such a beautiful woman and only knew how to hold on to the Thunder Xian vine. If Lin Yi really was that kind of person, then she wouldn't be able to help him. From the beginning, he wouldn't have extorted her. Reverse the situation, my ass. For Huayuti's careful thoughts, Lin Yi didn't notice at all. The reason why he took the initiative to solve the problem was that he didn't want Huayuti to have an accident again, but this wasn't the main reason. The main problem was that time was limited. He really didn't want to waste too much time on the road. Huayuti was a nascent soul stage master. In theory, she could stay here for a full month, which was still plenty of time. But Lin Yi was different, although he was strong enough to kill a profound ascending stage master, but in terms of strength alone, he was only at the peak of the early nascent soul stage. Who knew how the teleportation formation was set up? If this thing was purely based on one's cultivation level, it would be very disadvantageous for Lin Yi. What if there was a delay on the road? If he was trapped here and couldn't get out, he would really be screwed to death. Since the limit of a Yuanying stage master was only 1 month, then the limit of a peak early Yuanying stage master was only half a month at most, or even 10 days was very likely. This time was extremely tight. If something happened on the way, it would be over. This time it was related to Ning Xuefei's lifelong event. Lin Yi did not want to end up in a tragedy. Therefore, he had no other choice. Along the way, he must cut the Gordian knot. If he could get rid of a roadblock like the humanoid vine in one move, then there would be no need for a second move. In this way, Huayudi, a nascent soul stage master, became his assistant. To be precise, she was purely a bystander. She didn't even have a chance to make a move. Generally, by the time she found a threat, Linny would have already dealt with it in one move. Being sheltered under the arm of a mere peak early Yuaniing stage master, if it was any other nascent soul stage master, they would feel awkward. At least they would lose face, but Huayudi didn't have such a thought. On the contrary, she felt that this feeling was very wonderful. It made her feel at ease from the bottom of her heart. Linny swept through everything in front of him, and Huayudi followed behind him, letting her imagination run wild. She'd stop occasionally to confirm the direction and route they were taking. The two walked like this for half a day, and the sky was starting to darken again. Linny suddenly stopped in his tracks, and stopped in his tracks. Bang! Huayudi didn't know what she was thinking at this time. She bumped into Linny's body, causing Linny to stagger. Only then did she react and suddenly blushed. Seeing Linny turn his head, she rolled her eyes and quickly complained, "Why did you suddenly stop?" Linny was speechless for a while. He looked at this chick and helplessly pointed to the front, but he didn't say much. Not to mention, with this chick's figure and elasticity, it was actually quite comfortable to be bumped from behind. What? Is there danger again? Huayudi muttered. Anyway, as long as she looked at Linny's back along the way, she couldn't help but be distracted. She was already used to this kind of thing. In front of Linny, her demeanor as a nascent soul stage master had long been thrown away. She didn't have any self-awareness at all. It's not dangerous, but you have to wait for me here for a while. I have a friend who seems to be in some trouble. Linny frowned slightly. Your friend? Huayudi was stunned when she heard this. She quickly spread out her divine sense to sense around. Only then did she find that there seemed to be a conflict between a few people in the distance. Among them were Linny's friends? It wasn't too far away from where the two of them were, probably less than 2,000 feet away. At this moment, in a corner of a canyon, 3 men were surrounding a man and a woman. All of them had lewd and sinister smiles on their faces. Haha, I'll say it again. Leave the treasures and this chick, then I can spare your life. If you don't know what's good for you, hee hee. One of the men standing on the side of the 3 laughed incomparably lewdly. At the same time, the other 2 also laughed proudly. The 3 of them surrounded the man and woman from the left, center, and right. Behind them was the canyon cliff. Unless the man and woman could grow wings and fly, it would be a fool's dream to escape. Don't even think about it. This was the resolute voice of a man. He spread out his arms and tightly protected the woman behind him. Facing the 3 men, he said fearlessly, "Even if I, Chi Wenhan, die, I will not let you touch a single hair on my body." From afar, Linny couldn't help but laugh when he heard this voice. This was really Chi Wenhan's personality. As the young master of the Heaven's Equal Escort Agency, he didn't have the air of a spoiled brat. Instead, he was as resolute and courageous as a Jianghu hero. He had the temperament of a chivalrous hero. Since it was Chi Wenhan and Xia Luoluo who were in trouble, Lin Yi originally wanted to rush over to help them. However, after hearing the words of these people, his footsteps immediately slowed down. Chapter 4686. If he wanted to warm up the relationship between the two of them, simply being alone was not enough. Perhaps they would not be able to break through this layer of window paper until the end of the trial. The best way was to give them an opportunity, and right now, it was a heaven-sent opportunity. The trick of a hero saving the beauty had been used too many times in the secular world. In order to win the beauty's heart, those playboys had to create their own opportunities even if they didn't have the opportunity. They asked people to pretend to be hooligans to set off their glorious image. This trick was so common that it was not new at all. If he didn't know Chi Wenhan's character, Lin Yi even couldn't help but wonder if these 3 guys were actors he deliberately hired with spiritual jades. After all, the timing of their appearance was simply perfect. Boy, are you stupid? If you weren't the young master of South Continent's Equal Heaven Escort Agency, Master Ian would have killed you long ago. How dare you be so stubborn in front of us? With such a poor strength, how can you be a hero? The other man with the ugly head and rat eyes sneered. That's right, you dare to be a hero in front of us. How many brains do you have? Or do you have no brains at all? Don't you look at the comparison of strength? You are just at the peak of the early stage of nascent soul realm and one at the early stage of nascent soul realm, and you want to fight against our Master Ian. I'm surprised. Who gave you the courage and courage? The previous man kept talking and ridiculed them. I say, haven't you figured out the situation yet? Our Master Ian is the core disciple of Snow Sword Sect in the Middle Island, a real master at the peak of nascent soul realm. Do you understand what this means? This means that now in this West Island trial, our young Master Ian is the strongest one. Now I don't have to waste my breath on what to do, right? The man with the ugly head and rat-like eyes had a complacent expression on his face. Snowsword Sect? Linny, who was walking over slowly, was stunned when he heard this word. He secretly thought that things in this world were really coincidental. Fortunately, this guy was not Wei Shinjin. Otherwise, today's thing would be really interesting. Well, have you thought about it? The man in the middle of the three, who was called Master Ian, said. At first glance, this man looked a bit like a master. He was also handsome, but there was always a bit of evil in his eyes. He always gave people a feeling that he was not above board. Humph, do I even need to think about this? I'll say it again, if you dare to touch a hair on Lualua's head, I won't rest until you die today. Chi Wenhan narrowed his eyes and stared at young Master Ian. This person was the biggest threat. After all, he was an expert at the peak of the nascent soul realm. Just him alone was not something that he and Xia Luoluo could deal with. TSK, it sounds like you have some backbone. It's a pity that his brain isn't that good. Young Master Ian didn't even look at Chi Wenhan as he stared unscrupulously at Xia Luoluo. He was a veteran who had seen countless women. Naturally, he could tell that Xia Luoluo's current appearance was a disguise. Just from her temperament, he could tell that this woman was definitely a rare beauty. Xia Luoluo was scared by his stare, and she quickly hid behind Chi Wenhan. Although she was stronger than Chi Wenhan, women were always naturally weaker at this time. Fortunately, Chi Wenhan's performance gave her some comfort. Thanks to these three people, she felt a little hazy in her heart. It was starting to sprout. Young Master Ian also poked his head out and looked greedily at the hiding Xia Luoluo. He smacked his lips as if he was tasting a rare toy. He said to the unyielding Chi Wenhan, "Brat, give this girl to me. At most, I'll just play with her. I won't kill her. This way, it'll be good for you, me, and her. Otherwise, she can only be buried with your boring man's pride. Think carefully about which is more important." Chi Wenhan was originally very resolute, but after hearing these words, his heart subconsciously wavered. He knew that with his strength, he couldn't protect Xia Luoluo. It didn't matter if he died here, but if he dragged Xia Luoluo to die with him? That wouldn't be justifiable. However, Chi Wenhan turned his head and looked at Xia Luoluo. After understanding the meaning of the other's gaze, his wavering immediately disappeared. Xia Luoluo had expressed it very clearly. She would rather die than be given to this bastard. Since that was the case, what was there to hesitate about? Humph, I've thought it through very clearly. If you want to touch even a strand of my hair, you'll have to do it over my dead body. Chi Wenhan paused, and suddenly, his blood surged as he roared, "Come." This sound was like a clap of thunder that came out of nowhere. Even the clouds in the sky were shaken a bit. As for the three people who were close to Chi Pai, they were even more shocked. Each of their expressions changed greatly, and they took several steps back. Xia Luoluo's gaze stared straight at Chi Wenhan from behind. Her eyes flickered with a peculiar light. She was also shocked, but she was pleasantly surprised. An intense warmth immediately surged from the bottom of her heart. At this moment, the gaze she looked at Chi Wenhan with became even more tender and sweet. She didn't have this kind of opportunity in the past, so even if she had a good impression of Chi Wenhan, it was only a good impression. She wasn't sure that this was the man she could entrust her life to. But now, she was sure that although the situation was dangerous, there was a lover who was willing to die for her. What else could she ask for in this life? Chi Wenhan didn't notice Xia Luoluo's tender and sweet gaze behind him. He only stared at the three people in front of him. In particular, he stared at young Master Ian. Looking at their expressions, he knew that these people were already angry out of humiliation. Next, there would be a bloody battle to the death. He probably wouldn't survive today, but no matter what, he had to at least give Xia Luoluo a chance to escape. No matter what, he couldn't let her fall into the hands of these beasts. "Oh, I didn't expect you to be such a tough guy. I really admire you a little now." After being shocked, young Master Ian didn't immediately launch an attack like Chi Wenhan had imagined. Instead, he still looked like a cat playing with a mouse. However, he didn't want Chi Wenhan to take the initiative to retreat like before. He looked at Chi Wenhan as if he was looking at a dead man. He admired tough guys, but if it was a tough guy who went against him, it was better to kill him. Otherwise, there would be endless trouble in the future. Haha, he's indeed a tough guy. Unfortunately, tough guys don't have a good ending, especially tough guys who go against our young Master Ian. The ugly guy echoed with a laugh. "That's right. Our young Master Ian is being merciful and wants to spare your life, but you don't even appreciate it. There are so many brainless idiots in this world, especially this kind. They're so stupid that they want to cry. The other person also mocked. Chapter 4687. Young Masterine seemed to enjoy the feeling of a cat playing with a mouse. Holding his arms and pinching his chin, he said, "Tut tut, I have to say that this girl is really the best. Even if she disguises herself, she can't hide her natural beauty. I'm so lucky." Speaking of this, the opportunity to come to West Island should have belonged to Wei Shinjin, the big idiot, but that idiot had to wander around Tiandan Pavilion every day. What a fucking idiot. Hee, if it weren't for that, I wouldn't have met such a wonderful girl. It's really God's will, ha 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 ha. That's right, young Masterine. Wei Shinjin is just at the early stage of Yuanying realm. He was valued by the senior management of the sect only because he got acquainted with the will of heaven. How dare he compare with our young Masterine? The ugly guy flattered. Yes, let's take this opportunity to win glory for Middle Island. As long as young Masterine wins the Princess of West Island, you will have a meteoric rise. Moreover, Deputy Island Owner Chu will also treat us differently. That bullshit Wei Shinjin doesn't even deserve to carry shoes for our young Masterine. The other guy also flattered, unwilling to be left behind. You two have hit the nail on the head. If I become rich this time, I won't forget your benefits. Young Masterine laughed happily. Although he was very powerful, he didn't have any strong backing in the school. So, he hadn't been very successful. Especially in the past 2 years, even Wei Shinjin had become a core disciple of the school. This was something that made him unhappy no matter how he looked at it. This time, he could use this rare opportunity to make a name for himself in one fell swoop. At that time, he would like to see how those snobbish people of the Snow Sword School would react. Of course, even if he, young Masterine, was not successful in the Snow Sword School, he was still a high and mighty core disciple. As for the bullshit South Continent escort agency behind Qi Wenhan, he did not care about it at all. It was just a small, unranked force. Perhaps there were people in the South Continent Sea who would take it seriously, but how could it compare to a large sect like the Middle Island? There was no comparison between them at all, so even if he killed Qi Wenhan here, there wouldn't be any repercussions. Putting aside the fact that he could kill people to silence them, even if the news leaked out, would the damn South State Escort Agency dare to go to Middle Island to seek revenge? Young Masterine said as he walked towards Qi Wenhan and Xia Luoluo. There was a lascivious smile on his face. In his eyes, there was only a beauty in disguise. As for the rotten egg in front of him, he could casually squash it to death with one hand. He didn't even bother to look at it. Qi Wenhan gritted his teeth. Just as he was about to attack recklessly, Xia Luoluo suddenly rushed out from behind and shielded him behind her. She gritted her teeth at the approaching young Masterine and said, "If you dare to do anything to me, I'd rather die than live in disgrace." Surprised, Qi Wenhan looked at Xia Luoluo's back, and his eyes couldn't help but redden. He didn't even have time to feel touched, and hurriedly rushed to protect her behind him, yelling, "If you have any problems, come at me." Ha 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 ha, what a good saying. Interesting, this is too interesting. I like to break up lovers, it's only satisfying this way. Young Masterine sneered unscrupulously. A mere peak-early nascent soul cultivator has the nerve to say this to me? You'd rather die than live in disgrace? What a big joke. I think it should be called, Die in Disgrace. I'll be fine even if you're broken. After saying that, young Master Yin's aura of a perfected nascent soul cultivator enveloped Qi Wenhan and Xia Luoluo without reservation. Under the strong pressure, the two's hearts tightened at the same time. They were afraid that today was really going to be dangerous. However, at this moment, a voice suddenly interrupted. So what if you're at the peak early nascent soul? Are you looking down on me? Along with the voice, Lin Yi appeared in front of everyone with a cold expression. Hui Yudi, who was following behind him, couldn't help but feel nervous. She knew that Lin Yi's strength couldn't be measured with common sense. She also knew that this man and woman were Lin Yi's friends, so Lin Yi would definitely stand up for them. However, if it really came to this point, it wouldn't be so easy to end things, because the strength of the three opponents was really not weak. Not to mention that young Master Yin in the middle was a perfected nascent soul cultivator, even the two followers next to him were perfected nascent soul cultivators. Facing this kind of strength, these two friends of Lin Yi couldn't do anything at all, and even if Lin Yi could fight opponents who were at a higher level than him, his strength was only at the peak early nascent soul stage. Could he be a match for these three people? Hui Yudi even felt that even if she joined the battle, she might not be able to gain an advantage against these three people, because at that time, not only would Lin Yi's two friends not be of help, but they would also become a burden. The consequences were really unpredictable. Qi Wenhan, who'd been prepared to die, was overjoyed when he saw Lin Yi's sudden appearance. There was finally hope for him. Oh? Here comes another weakling who isn't afraid of death. What kind of day is it today? Why do useless things dare to come and play the hero? Young Master Yin glanced at Lin Yi with extreme contempt. When he saw Hui Yudi, his eyes immediately lit up. Another rare great beauty. Xia Luolua's appearance was not very clear because of her disguise, but this Hui Yudi was different. Even if she wore a veil, it couldn't hide her heavenly beauty, especially that exquisite and curvaceous body. This was a stunning beauty that no man would be able to resist when they saw her. You're from the Snow Sword faction? Lin Yi looked at the three people and asked young Master Yin, who was in the middle, with the corner of his mouth slightly raised. That's right. Young Master Yin was stunned for a moment, and then he said proudly, if you know what's good for you, hurry up and scram. Don't cause trouble for your own faction. You can't afford to offend them. Is that so? Lin Yi smiled noncommittally, and instead of answering, he asked, from what you said just now, it seems like Wei Shinjin is your enemy. Oh? Young Master Yin couldn't help but be stunned again. He couldn't help but glance at Lin Yi suspiciously. Could it be that this brat knew that idiot Wei Shinjin? But no matter what, he clearly had no reason to act cowardly in front of such a nameless brat. Immediately, he raised his head proudly and said, so what if I am? And where did you come from? Oh, nothing much. I'm just sorry to tell you that you can go die now. Lin Yi smiled lightly. In an instant, everyone was stunned. You're tuning into the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.